Chapter 483. Xiongsheng was known as the strongest attack of the younger generation. He was a member of the Star Zhao Empire's royal family. He had been fighting with the army in the early years, tempering himself on the battlefield. After a few years, no one knew how strong he was. Now that he had appeared, there was no suspense in this battle. The soldiers looked at the people on the city wall with sympathy in their eyes. No one was spared under Xiongsheng's giant sword. In their opinion, no matter who it was inevitable that they would fall. Strongest attack. When Yin Nuoxing and the others heard the other party's title, they couldn't help but reveal a look of interest. Yuan Shi and the others couldn't help but shake their heads. If the former went up, they would know what the strongest attack was. Yuan Shi grinned. He sensed Xiongsheng's strength and suppressed his cultivation to the same level as the latter. Then, he jumped down from the city wall. Even Yi Daofeng and the others couldn't stop him in time. It's fine. Don't worry. Seeing Yi Daofeng and the others nervous, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand indifferently. With Yuan Shi's strength, even if he suppressed his cultivation to the same level, he would be invincible with just one hand. Seeing this, Yi Daofeng could only sigh. It was their problem. They had a chance of winning. They didn't want anything to happen to Yin Nuoxing and the others. In the current Dragon Mist royal family, their lineage was slightly weaker. It was only because they were born late. Even the first prince was only 26 years old and had just reached the peak of the Soul Realm. There were even people from the other lineages who had stepped into the Martial Realm or Law Realm, becoming Martial King or Soul King. Of course, it was only a matter of age. Not to mention Yi Daofeng, even the 7th prince was at the 5th level of the Soul Realm. Given some time, all 7 of them would be able to step into the Martial Realm or Law Realm. Scapegoat? On the battlefield, Xiongsheng felt that Yuan Shi had the same strength as him. He looked at him with contempt and then at his mask. Then, he sneered, "You have 3 breaths of time to admit defeat. Otherwise, when I make my move, it won't be as simple as losing." Yuan Shi rolled his eyes. This guy was even crazier than Nightmare. He didn't say anything and waved the bronze sword in his hand. It was an ordinary weapon. He took it from Yi Ding's waist when he jumped down. Seeing that Yuan Shi didn't say anything, Xiongsheng laughed loudly. A gust of cold wind swept past. Sword Qi covered the sky and scattered in the air, bringing with it a murderous intent. Under that cold intent, Xiongsheng moved and rushed towards Yuan Shi. His body was almost pulled into a black shadow. Every step he took left a footprint on the ground. His hand was dragging the huge sword, cutting a long gully on the ground. Yuan Shi also moved. He slowly took out the bronze sword from his back. Both of his hands held the sword hilt firmly. He stared at Xiongsheng with a sharp gaze. A faint ethereal aura was emitted. He didn't cultivate the sword, but after sparring with Yin Nuoxing, he gradually understood the sword. His starting stance was one of the sword techniques that Yin Nuoxing used before. Yin Nuoxing was a little surprised. When did this guy learn his sword techniques? Even though it was just a prototype, it was already half as powerful. At least that was what he thought. Seeing the 2 people's movements, everyone felt a terrifying sword intent. The air seemed to have frozen. Their eyes were fixed on the 2 people who were getting closer and closer. Xiongsheng finally raised his sword. A cold light shone on the sun in the sky. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind and thunder under his feet. His sword was as fast as thunder and lightning. Everyone only saw an extreme sword light flash across the sky. It was very dazzling. Yuan Shi clenched her bronze sword with both hands, and the sword tip swayed slightly. Looking at the figure that was about to disappear, she felt as if a mountain was slamming down on her. However, she could not help but grin. She calmly stomped her feet on the ground, and then her figure disappeared from everyone's sight. Even Xiong Haiya in the sky was startled, and a bad premonition appeared in his heart. Dang! Suddenly, there was the sound of metal colliding. 2 sword lights flashed through the air. In an instant, the 2 people appeared again. Xiongsheng and Yuan Shi had their backs to each other. They were standing there in the same position as before. There was no blood. They couldn't even see the last movement of the sword. Kacha! After a short moment, a clear cracking sound was heard. The bronze sword that Yuan she was holding suddenly broke into pieces. The people in the army were overjoyed. On the other hand, Yi Daofeng's face darkened. Had he lost? However, in the next moment, a cold wind blew past. The heavy sword behind Yuan, she fell to the ground. Then, Qiongsheng's body was blown away like dust. It floated in the air and disappeared without a trace. At that moment, the people who wanted to shout had their mouths wide open. It was as if a duck had been grabbed by the throat. Everyone felt their hearts beat violently. Qiongsheng had lost? Not only had he lost, but there wasn't even a speck of dust left. He was completely dead. The quality of this sword is so bad. It couldn't even last a single battle. After a short moment, Yuan Shi stretched his back and said that the sword wasn't good enough. Everyone was speechless. Then, he sighed and turned around. He slowly walked back and picked up the huge sword that Qiongsheng had left behind. Then, he waved at Qionghaye and said with a smile, "Next." Everyone recovered from their shock. Qionghaye flung his robe fiercely and swept his gloomy gaze across the army, as if he was thinking about who to send out for battle. In that instant, Yuan Shi unleashed 7 swords. The first sword blocked Qiongsheng's great sword, and the remaining 6 swords all landed on Qiongsheng's body without holding back. The sword Qi directly turned his body into dust. The bronze sword's material is not strong, so it is very difficult to resist that kind of speed. Yin Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. Only he could see clearly with his evil spirit eye. "Little star, what about you?" Xian suddenly asked curiously. "Me?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He thought for a moment and said, "If I go, I won't even be able to use the first attack. The bronze sword will disintegrate in the air." He wasn't exaggerating. Every attack of his contained the element of light. Ordinary materials would be destroyed by the extreme speed of the element of light. But when Yi Daofeng and the others heard this, they were shocked. If he couldn't even use the first attack, how fast was he? At this moment, Qionghaye wasn't the only one with an ugly expression. Everyone in the Xingzhou Empire's army had an ugly expression. Qiongsheng's death meant that their army had lost a capable general. Moreover, there weren't many people stronger than Qiongsheng. They were probably all in the 8th or 9th level of the spirit realm. This was why Qionghaye was still hesitating. Qiong in 7th level of the spirit realm. This person's talent is very strong in the Xingzhou Empire. He's an expert who cultivates the Tao. He's mastered quite a few Taos. There seem to be 4 of them. Moreover, he's good at combining Taos. When he combines them, he's even stronger than someone who has comprehended the Tao. Yiding said softly, "If Mr. Yuan continues to suppress his cultivation to the 6th level, I'm afraid, so fast." Yiding was about to say something when he saw Qiong fly out. His body drew an arc in the sky and landed heavily in front of the army. Cracks appeared on the ground as he fainted. Yiding's face twitched when he saw Yuan Shi swinging the giant sword that weighed 1,000 pounds in boredom. He was speechless. It seemed that even if he suppressed his cultivation, this group of people couldn't be judged by common sense. Before he could finish speaking, Qiong had been defeated. Yi Daofeng and Qionghaye were also speechless. The latter's expression was so ugly that it looked like he had eaten a dead rat. He didn't know what to say for a moment. This rule was set by him. Although he didn't say that he couldn't use a higher cultivation to suppress. If he did, he would lose all his face. Moreover, in the Xingzhou Empire's army, there were very few people around the 6th level of the spirit realm who were stronger than Qiongsheng. What to do? Should he give up? Qionghaye fiercely shook his head. He couldn't bring himself to admit defeat. After thinking about it, he sent another 3 6th level spirit realm elites up. Without exception, they were all sent flying by Yuan Shi's sword. This time, it was the 7 armies' turn to be speechless. The leaders of the various empires saw Qionghaye's gloomy expression and gritted teeth and couldn't say anything. It could be said that Qionghaye's expression was as gloomy as his confidence when he first called for the competition. It was as if a storm was brewing. Yi Daofeng and the others saw this result and let out a sigh of relief. They couldn't help but sigh. What a drama. Uncle Qiong, sorry for the offense. Yi Daofeng cupped his fists towards Qiong Haiya. He was secretly laughing in his heart. In the eyes of Qiong Haiya, this action was a form of mockery. His expression became even gloomier, but he couldn't say anything. In front of the army, he really couldn't shed all pretense of cordiality. Where he put his face then? Nephew's magi are really strong. According to the agreement, we will retreat 500 miles. Qiong Haiya flicked his sleeves and said with gritted teeth, "Don't forget what nephew said." After saying that, he suddenly turned around and glanced at the 7 armies. His voice was indifferent as he said, 7 armies, retreat 500 miles. Hearing this, everyone sighed silently in their hearts. However, they didn't care. In their opinion, there was no difference whether they retreated or not. They had the same confidence as Qiong Haiya. Many soldiers also didn't think that the Dragon Mist Empire could take out the sacred item. Although they thought so, a loss was a loss. One by one, they spread out and spread the order to every corner of the army. On the city wall, Yin Nuoxing looked at the army that retreated under Qiong Haiya's command. He couldn't help but whistle. Well, the matter had been resolved for a while. As for the rest, thinking of this, he looked at Yi Daofeng and said, "I'll leave the rest to you. Even if the profound dragon ritual is successfully held, the 7 armies won't come here for nothing." "I understand." Yi Daofeng nodded. He then cupped his hands at Yin Nuoxing and said, "Thank you for your help, Mr. Yin." What he said was not only because of the competition, but also because of the sacred item. If it wasn't for Yin Nuoxing's appearance, Jun Luo, Yi, and the others would have already left this place. Then, they would never be able to find a sacred item. The 7 armies would also use this as an excuse to break into the city. At that time, the Dragon Mist Empire would be wiped off the face of the profound dragon continent. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand. He only wanted to see if the so-called sacrificial fire was the Yin spiritual fire. Although the profound dragon continent wasn't as big as the God Realm, it was still as big as 2 divine sky cities. It would take a long time to search the entire continent. If the sacrificial fire wasn't the Yin spiritual fire, then they would really have to set foot in other places of the profound dragon continent. Oh right, where's the profound dragon ritual being held? Yin Nuoxing suddenly asked. Hearing this, Yi Daofeng took out the map and slowly spread it out. Then he pointed to the center of the profound dragon continent for Yin Nuoxing to see. It was the center of the profound dragon continent. One could clearly see that the center was a big circle that was cut into 8 pieces by the 8 great empires like cutting a cake. In the center, where the borders were the weakest, there was also a circle drawn there, as if something was trapped inside. The center of the profound dragon continent, Yin Nuoxing muttered. Yi Daofeng nodded and said, "That for the profound dragon ritual is held every year. Usually, there's nothing there. Only when the profound dragon ritual is held will the people of the 8 great empires and the major forces go there." It's said that the profound dragon ritual is a passage to another world. Of course, this information is only known to the higher-ups. Yin Nuoxing glanced at the circle in the center. He couldn't help but laugh and nod. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to bring people to the circle, a soldier in golden armor flew up from below the city wall. Soon after, he knelt down on one knee in front of Yi Daofeng and Yin Nuoxing and said respectfully, "Your Highness, His Majesty wants you to go there. Please bring a few friends with you." "Us?" Yin Nuoxing pointed at himself, a little stunned. Chapter 484. Yi Shiwen strolled through Dragon Mist City. Perhaps it was because of the earth-shattering drumbeats. Everyone thought that the 7 armies were about to launch an all-out attack. The streets were very chaotic. Countless people were busy packing their luggage, as if they wanted to leave Dragon Mist City. Obviously, even the ordinary people didn't believe that the Dragon Mist Empire could win the war. After the first prince saw this, he couldn't do anything to stop it. He could only comfort the people a little. As for other things, such as the guarantee that Dragon Mist City wouldn't fall, he really couldn't guarantee it. Yin Nuoxing and the others had the ability to stop it, but they wouldn't listen to his orders. This made the first prince sigh in sorrow. "Nuoxing, I won't learn a move from you." Yuan Shi weighed the 2-meter-long and half-meter-wide sword in his hand. Suddenly, he looked at Yun Nuashing and transmitted his voice softly. Seeing that the roadside was still selling sugar-coated haws, Yun Nuashing ran over excitedly and bought a few skewers. He handed one to Xian and the others, then gave one to Yuan Shi. Only then did he reply, "What is it?" "The move you used with the Netherworld Ruin Sword." Yuan Shi took a bite of the sugar-coated haws and said, "Oh, the Netherworld Heavenly Slash." Yin Nuashing mumbled incoherently. Then he said, "This move is deadly. Do you really want to learn it?" The Netherworld Heavenly Slash was a sword skill attached to the Netherworld Ruin Sword. It was the only one. Although there were some other skills sealed in the Netherworld Ruin Sword, Yin Nuashing couldn't touch them even if he wanted to. The Netherworld Ruins Sword told him that he wasn't strong enough to come into contact with this level of secret skill. He could only suppress his desire to explore it. However, this move was already very difficult for him. Deadly. Yuan Shi was so scared that he directly swallowed a gourd. He choked, and his face turned red. He couldn't help coughing. "Yes." Yin Nuashing nodded and said, "I used 90% of my energy, 90% of my elemental energy, 90% of my life force, 90% of my soul energy, and 90% of my spiritual energy. With the Netherruin Sword's quality and my own strength, it's enough to slice a low-level Netherworld Emperor in half. But that's all. Brother, I'm not going to kill anyone with this sword. I'm going to kill myself." Yuan Shi's eyes widened when he heard this. 90% of his strength was equivalent to draining his body dry. What was he going to do with the remaining strength? Of course, you can also use 100% of your full strength. 90% is just the basic consumption. Furthermore, if you have less than 90% of your remaining energy, it will be directly drained. The greater the power of the God tool, the greater the power of the firmament slash. Yin Nuashing glanced at him, and then added, "The so-called self-destruction of 800 can cause 1,200 damage to the enemy. Speaking of which, do you still want to learn?" Yin Nuashing threw the bamboo stick to the side and looked at Yuan Shi with a faint smile. Yuan Shi wiped the sweat from his forehead in shock. He really wanted to learn. "Tisk, I thought you would be so scared that you didn't want to learn." Seeing his determined gaze, Yin Nuashing smiled and shook her head. She seemed to have thought of something and said, "Oh right, the Firmament Slash is a divine rank mystic skill. You have to be mentally prepared." Divine? Divine rank? That divine rank? Yuan Shi was completely scared out of her wits this time, and the candied haw in her hand fell to the ground. Secret skills and mystical skills were divided into common, low, medium, high, excellent, elite, extreme, immortal, saint, and absolute. As for the divine rank, it was above these 10 ranks. Learning a divine rank mystical skill had nothing to do with one's strength, but it was extremely difficult to learn. It also required an extraordinary level of comprehension to learn it thoroughly. Some people joked that if one could comprehend a divine rank mystical skill, then it would be easy to comprehend the will of elements, and at that time, anyone could become an array master. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to learn a divine rank mystic skill. On the other hand, it was easier for an array master to learn a divine rank mystic skill. Of course, it was only a little easier. Learn. Why wouldn't I learn it? Since it's a divine rank mystic skill, then I have to learn it even more. After learning it, I can become a respected array master. Yuan Shi grinned and laughed loudly. Glancing at him, Yin Nuashing shook her head and smiled faintly. Life is like a play. It all depends on acting skills. Hearing this, Yuan Shi's smiling face immediately collapsed. Without waiting for him to say anything, he heard Yin Nuashing transmit her voice again. "Do you have any low-level sword skills or fighting skills? The requirements aren't high. If it's not a divine rank mystic skill, then it's fine too. Damn, your grandpa's fine too. The Heart Sutra I learned is only a high-level mystic skill. It's just enough to let me pass the immortal rank. You want to say that it's a divine rank mystic skill?" Yuan Shi immediately exploded. 88, 88, Yin Nuashing spread out her hands and sighed. "I can't help it. There are only 2 kinds of mystic skills in my head, those that I've learned and those that I haven't. Among those that I've learned, the lowest is the immortal rank, and the highest is the divine rank. As for those that I haven't learned, the lowest is the immortal rank, and the highest is the divine rank. Mystic skills are a combination of 3 or 4 mystic skills, and the lowest is the absolute rank. Yuan Shi, at yen% asterisk, if you learn such a high-level mystic skill, can you handle it? Yuan Shi was very doubtful of life. He glanced at Yin Nuoxing. No, I can't handle it. Don't you see that I look like I'm about to die after every battle? It's almost like I'm about to die from exhaustion. Yin Nuoxing shook her head in distress and sighed. Who asked me to not have any low-level mystic skills? Sai, I'm so worried. You're F*** taking advantage of me. Yuan Shi cursed. So, do you want to learn 1 or 2 types? Yin Nuoxing glanced at him arrogantly. That look made Yuan Shi want to stamp his shoe on her face. Let me think about it. After a while, Yuan Shi smiled bitterly. He knew very well that a divine rank mystic skill was really not something that an ordinary person could handle. Perhaps only Yin Nuoxing, who had a godly physique and energy crystals, could squander it. Let me know when you've thought about it. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She was also clear about what Yuan Shi was thinking about, so she didn't impart it to him rashly. Learning a divine rank mystic skill with an immortal rank body required not only comprehension, but also great courage. Learning a divine rank mystic skill had a chance of dying. This sentence was never frightening because divine rank mystic skills were difficult to control and subdue. It was easy to go berserk during cultivation, and the body and soul would be destroyed. In general, based on the divine rank mystic skills that I've learned so far, I can only conclude that these things are not used for sparring. They're used to kill people and cause destruction. Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. Cause destruction. Yuan Shi inexplicably thought of the scene in the ghostly forest. He couldn't help but shudder and nod. That kind of high-level mystic skill was indeed not used for sparring. Even if one couldn't unleash 100% of its power, it was still a very powerful mystic skill, even if one could only unleash 1,000th or even 1/10,000th of its power. Then what grade is the Star Arts? Yuan Shi suddenly asked. Star Arts? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. After thinking for a long time, she looked at Yuan Shi strangely and said, I don't know, I haven't learned it before. You haven't learned it before? This time, it was Yuan Shi's turn to be surprised. That day in the ghostly forest, the huge beam of starlight that fell from the sky turned the entire ghostly forest into an abyss and destroyed 3 eternal divine weapons. Jin Jinwang even said the words Star Arts. Think about it carefully. Don't scare me. Yuan Shi was a little flustered. It was a sudden fluster without any reason. Seeing his nervous face, Yin Nuoxing also closed her eyes and carefully rummaged in her mind. After a while, she opened her eyes again and shook her head. No, this is the first time I've heard this name. But that day, Yuan Shi was a little anxious. He paused and seemed to think of something. Then, he stopped talking and turned his eyes to Zian. Yin Nuoxing strangely followed his gaze. As soon as she turned her head, she saw Zian and Mei Mao's eyes flicker slightly, and her expression changed slightly. She seemed to be a little nervous, but if one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't be able to tell. Then, she sighed inexplicably and reached out her hand to squeeze Yin Nuoxing's palm. She whispered, Little star, I can't hide it anymore. Ah! Yin Nuoxing was stunned, but then she heard Yuan Shi sigh heavily. She suddenly turned her head and saw him patting her shoulder. She was even more shocked. Yuan Shi patted the right side of his forehead. His eyes were a little sad. He said telepathically, Brother, you didn't tell me such a big thing. That's not very nice of you. Seeing his actions and combining them with his words, Yin Nuoxing finally understood. She turned her head and glared at Zian. Zian looked at him innocently. Her watery eyes softened his heart. He squeezed her little hand and couldn't say anything. He could only smile bitterly. Don't think too much. It's not a big deal, really. Yin Nuoxing patted Yuan Shi's shoulder, shook her head, and smiled calmly. Seeing this, Yuan Shi looked at her with disdain and said, Zian was right. You never tell the truth. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He couldn't tell her that he might be controlled by chaos at any time. If it came to that point, he might choose to go on the road alone. He would send Xian and Yi Shi to the Nine Deities Palace, then send Yuan Shi back home, and then complete his mission alone. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's silent, bitter smile, Yuan Shi also knew that he couldn't pry open Yin Nuoxing's stubborn mouth. He sighed softly and didn't ask any more questions. It didn't take long. After Yi Daofeng finished his speech, the group rushed towards the palace. They rushed into the palace in a few minutes. However, they didn't run towards the main hall. Instead, they went to a more remote palace. It was quiet and serene. The courtyard was very quiet. The grass, flowers, and trees blended into the scenery very naturally. It didn't seem abrupt at all. Yi Daofeng and the others stood at the door. They waited for a while before pushing the door open and entering. Yin Nuoxing and the others stood at the door for a while before they followed in. The palace was very quiet. There were no guards everywhere in the palace. When they pushed the door open and entered, they saw rows of neatly arranged bookshelves. There were also stacks of books piled up on the ground. Some of them were even half opened and hung at the side. It seemed a little messy. Rather than a palace, this place was more like a study. At the very front of the bookshelves, they saw a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged on the ground. He was surrounded by stacks of books that were 2 meters high. The middle-aged man was dressed very ordinarily. He wore a gray cloth shirt with a white robe draped over his shoulders. He had a short beard between his nose and lips. There was an indescribable calmness between his brows. There was also a hint of something else mixed in. His pitch-black eyes revealed an unfathomable feeling of profoundness. There was no joy or sorrow. No one knew what he was thinking. The man held a scroll in his hand. He supported his head with his left hand and seemed a little lazy. He casually glanced at a few lines of words on the scroll before carefully rolling it up and putting it to the side. He then picked up another book and repeated his actions. It wasn't until a creaking sound came from the door that the middle-aged man raised his gaze and looked at the 7 people who walked in side by side. A hint of warmth flashed in his eyes. Then he looked at the people who followed behind the 7 people. He casually closed the book and slowly stood up. "Father." The 7 people bowed slightly and respectfully said. Then the first prince began to talk about what had just happened. The middle-aged man listened very calmly. When Yi Daofeng finished, he let out a soft sigh and walked out from the pile of books. He arrived beside Yi Daofeng and patted his shoulder. He said plainly, "You all know what to do. I'm old now, so I can only be your shield." When Yi Daofeng and Yi Ding heard this, they were a little anxious. They wanted to say something, but when they saw the middle-aged man waving his hand, they could only swallow their words. The middle-aged man smiled and looked at the 7 people lovingly. Then he looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. He patted his robe and said respectfully, "Friend from the divine city, who have come from afar, I welcome you on behalf of the dragon Mist Empire." Yin Nuoxing was slightly taken aback. Then he rolled his eyes. Back then, he had heard from Yuqian that there were some expert from the god world and the small world. They had all carefully hidden their identities. Why was it that when it came to them, it was not so easy to hide their identities? Chapter 485. Even Yi Daofeng and the others were very surprised. Although they had already guessed a bit from Yin Nuoxing and Jun Luo Yi's conversation, they still couldn't help but be shocked when their father said it out loud. "I've also been to the Divine City. At that time, I was already a martial king. I went to the Divine City with a few friends who were similarly powerful. However, when we first arrived, the energy in our bodies completely disappeared and was replaced with a new and even purer energy. Because my friends didn't know what was going on, many of them died or were injured while trying to resist the energy replacement." The middle-aged man sighed and continued, "There weren't many people left in our group. When we joined forces to explore the Divine City, we were shocked by the strength of the people there. Martial kings and heaven immortals could be seen everywhere. There were even some people with even higher strength. Even now, I still can't forget the pressure they gave off. It made me feel like I was facing an abyss. We didn't explore the Divine City for very long. Perhaps it was because we no longer had the hot-bloodedness of our youth, or perhaps it was because we were afraid of the strength of the people in the Divine City. Our group didn't explore for very long. I'm afraid it wasn't even a month. However, I've been to that place before. According to the information that was sent to me, I believe you're from the Divine City. The middle-aged man's expression became serious after a while. He looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others and said firmly. At this moment, the hearts of Yi Daofeng and the others rose and fell upon hearing these words, and they were unable to calm down. So it turned out that their father had once gone to the Divine City, a sacred place that countless people yearned for. However, the outcome later on caused them to be unable to help but sigh. This was something that only Yi Daofeng could confirm. When he was only 5 years old, his father had once vanished for a period of time, and he had probably gone to the Divine City at that time. In the end, Yi Daofeng and the others all looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. They had all guessed it, and their father had confirmed it. However, they wanted Yin Nuoxing and the others' answers. This made their hearts fiercely clench. They were extremely nervous. Yin Nuoxing was a little surprised. The energy in the realm of the gods was very pure. It could automatically replace the impure energy in the bodies of people who came from small worlds. He had only heard of this before, but he did not know much about it. He did not expect it to be true. Yin Nuoxing stared at the middle-aged man calmly. He tried to find something in the latter's eyes, but in the end, he could only see a hint of calmness. However, he felt that the middle-aged man must be unwilling to give up. Yin Nuoxing did not know how much he had paid to go to the realm of the gods, but he knew that he had paid the price, but he did not have a chance to explore the realm of the gods. In the end, he had to come back with his tail between his legs. Yin Nuoxing could not help but let out a long sigh when she thought of this. Then she nodded heavily and said, "That's right. We're indeed from the god city that you speak of." Yi Daofeng and the others finally relaxed when they heard that. They heaved a heavy sigh of relief. Even the middle-aged man's hand trembled violently, and his breathing became slightly hurried. "What kind of world is it?" A clear voice made Yin Nuoxing turn around. It was Yi Yun who had spoken. At this moment, her Mei Mao was glowing brightly as she stared at Yin Nuoxing and the others. Even Yi Daofeng swallowed his saliva and listened nervously. "Yes, what kind of world is it?" Yin Nuoxing murmured. Then she raised her head and said softly, "The world we're in is called the realm of the gods. It means the world where the gods live. The realm of the gods is very big, and the vastness of its territory is unimaginable. It is divided into 7 large regions, and ordinary people would find it difficult to walk from one region to another even if they walked for thousands of years. On this huge stage, there are thousands of races, countless experts, and countless young experts competing with each other. Even we are only one of the members of that competition. It's just that we are separated from the rest of the world and are not known by others. Compared to the realm of the gods, the mystic dragon continent is only the size of 2 cities. However, even the size of the mystic dragon continent is only a drop in the ocean in the realm of the gods. It's so small that it's difficult to attract the attention of others. The mystic dragon continent is only a small world in the realm of the gods. It's a man-made small world, but it's able to perfectly reproduce new life forms, you guys. The gods are the true experts in the realm of the gods. One of them is below tens of thousands of people. Small worlds like this that are not under anyone's control, they can easily destroy countless of them. In the realm of the gods, there are countless experts and powerful forces. A city can stretch for hundreds of thousands of li, and the population can reach hundreds of billions. There are also countless cities in a large region. In the end, I'm afraid numbers don't have any meaning. But the realm of the gods is only one of the 3,000 macro worlds and 10,000 realms in the universe. It's also small and inconspicuous in the universe, but it's the brightest star. Yin Nuoxing also talked about other things, such as forbidden places. He talked about them in an exaggerated manner. When he saw that Yi Daofeng and the others could not hide their palpitations, his expression was a little strange. He did not know what nonsense he was talking about, but he still forced himself to finish. Hearing this, Yi Daofeng and the others felt a surge of emotions. They seemed to be imagining a scene where they could rule the heavens. That was the fantasy of all martial artists. They could create a world with their own strength, or control the 3,000 macro worlds. However, when these words fell into the ears of Xian and the others, their faces darkened. They didn't know what this bastard was talking about. God, the whole world knows that you broke 3 eternal weapons, okay? If you call that unknown, then what is known? The realm of the gods, where the gods are. That's the name of the god city. Gods, gods, so glorious, so magnificent. Yi Ding's heart was in a perilous situation. No one from the Xinlong continent had ever told him what kind of world the god city was. Today, he was lucky enough to hear Yun Nuoxing's words. He was afraid that there would be no one like him in the future. Of course, they wouldn't spread this information casually. Mr. Yun, where did you come from? Can you still go back? Yi Ding hurriedly patted his chest and asked rather calmly. There's a valley in the south of the Dragon Mist Empire. It's surrounded by a towering mountain, and there's a forest outside. There's an entrance there. As for whether we can go back or not, I'm not sure. Yin Nuoxing said indifferently. Even if they knew, it would be useless. According to Yu Chun, even the top experts of this world couldn't enter that place. 10,000 feet high cliff. It's actually there. No one cares about that place. It's a very good place to hide. Yi Daofeng instantly said the place Yin Nuoxing had pointed out. Even heaven-rank experts don't dare to set foot there casually. The cliff is 10,000 feet high, and the height of flying is limited. Even in the forest, there are maze formations and wild beasts, enough to trap heaven-rank experts to death. Maze formations? When we walked out, we weren't affected at all. Yin Nuoxing said strangely. Didn't they walk out smoothly that day? Yin Nuoxing, who was puzzled, felt someone tugging at the corner of his clothes. He couldn't help but lower his head, only to see Yishi's proud smile. He immediately understood everything. It must be this girl who broke the maze formation. Thinking of this, he laughed and hugged her, rubbing her head. Speaking of which, do you know who Jun Luo Yi is? Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of the smart girl that day and couldn't help but ask. He only knew that the latter seemed to be the priest of the Dragon Mist Empire's royal family. Jun Luo Yi is known as the most talented girl in the Dragon Mist Empire. Her talent is extremely high, and she's already an expert at the peak of the Soul Realm before the age of 25. When she was 15, she broke away from her family and had been training outside. She joined the Heavenly Profound sect and became a disciple of the Heavenly Profound Sovereign. The 11 direct disciples under him are also extremely powerful. The eldest disciple, Xin Qingshan, has already been certified as a Dharma seat and became a Soul King. As for Jun Luo Yi, she used her intelligence to convince everyone and became the 12th direct disciple of the Heavenly Profound Sovereign. It's said that Jun Luo Yi has grasped more than 100 Daos, and her comprehension is extremely high. She once killed a famous martial king at the peak of the Soul Realm and traveled to the other 7 great empires. She also made contributions in the army. The army led by her has always been victorious. A few years ago, in a great war, she killed her way to the neighboring country's royal capital and ended the war that lasted for 3 years. Then, 4 years ago, she passed the royal family's examination and became a priest. She was also chosen as the main priest of that year's profound dragon ritual. Then, just like what you know, she was only 21 years old. Yi Ding couldn't help but smile bitterly at the end. She snatched the sacred relic and left. Moreover, she successfully escaped with the help of many unknown people. Yin Nuoxing continued, making Yi Ding and the others smile bitterly. She snatched the Dragon Mist Empire's sacred relic in front of the 8 great empires and escaped unscathed. They really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, when I saw her a few days ago, she was still at the peak of the Soul Realm. She seemed to be stuck in her realm. Yi Daofeng added. Yun Nuoxing thought for a while and said, I'm afraid that when she was 15 years old, she was already planning how to snatch the Dragon Mist Empire's sacred relic. These 9 years, she was just preparing for this day. Perhaps when she left her family, she already came into contact with the profound Sky Sovereign. Later on, she teamed up with her senior and junior brothers as well as the people she met in the army to snatch the sacred relic. Of course, this is purely my guess. This, a plan that took an entire 9 years to prepare. When they heard this, the expressions of Yi Daofeng and the others became slightly heavy. Spending 9 years to prepare a banquet. If it was true, then this Jun Luo, he was truly quite extraordinary. Of course, the so-called stuck realm. I don't think it's the stuck realm. She wanted to wait until she entered the realm of the gods before breaking through. Of course, this is still my guess. I don't know if there are any benefits to breaking through in the realm of the gods, Yin Nuoxing said. So, Mr. Yin, when you let them go back then, you were sure that they would definitely come to participate in the profound dragon ritual this year? Yiding guessed. Yin Nuoxing nodded and said, in fact, for what Daofeng said just now, I could already guess that. After suppressing it for 4 years, she definitely won't be able to suppress it in the end. Maybe when we meet her, she'll already be at her limit. She needs to find a place to break through. If her ideal place is the realm of the gods, then she'll definitely come to participate in the profound dragon ritual 10 days later. At that time, we'll capture her. Yian couldn't help but ask. Let her complete the ritual. Are you going to dance with her after we capture her? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Yian couldn't help but mutter. If that's the case, then we'll have to prepare well for this year's profound dragon ritual. The sacrificial fire can indeed guide people to the divine city. When that time comes, will you all be going back? The middle-aged man looked at Yin Nuoxing and asked, We? Yin Nuoxing thought for a while, hesitated for a while, then shook her head and said, We're not in a hurry. We'll see how it goes. It's rare to come across a small world, so we came down to play. Anyway, we have a way to go back. Of course, even though we're not in a hurry, we still have to participate in this year's profound dragon ritual. Our guide introduced us to it when we came, so we're looking forward to it. All right, this year, the Dragon Mist Empire will give you a grand reception. The middle-aged man nodded solemnly, then looked at Yi Daofeng and the others and said, Daofeng, what do you all plan to do? Follow us to the divine city, or stay here to take over the throne. As soon as these words came out, Yi Daofeng and the others, who were excited just a moment ago, instantly calmed down, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them. The 7 brothers looked at each other, and for a moment, no one said anything. I want to go to the divine city. Young Master Yin described it so brilliantly. How can I not go? Suddenly, Yi Yun's voice rang out like a lark's, easing the tense atmosphere. Yi Daofeng and the others let out a sigh of relief, then looked at each other and clenched their teeth as if they had made a decision. Go, that world is your stage. You don't have to worry about the throne. I have my own arrangements. Seeing their complicated expressions, the middle-aged man also understood. Before Yi Daofeng and the others could say anything, he spoke first. The way he looked at the 7 of them was filled with unconcealable doting. He also knew that this small, profound dragon continent couldn't trap them. Father, your son is unfilial. Hearing this, Yi Daofeng's eyes reddened. He immediately knelt down and bowed deeply to the middle-aged man. Yin Nuoxing could even hear the sound of his forehead knocking on the floor. At the same time, Yi Ding and the others also knelt down. No hurry, there's still 10 more days. Seeing this, the middle-aged man helplessly shook his head. With a wave of his hand, he helped Yi Daofeng and the others up. Seeing them like this, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh. Yi Daofeng's group, Jun Luo Yi's group. What kind of storm would the 2 of them cause in the world of gods? However, that probably had nothing to do with him. On the day of the profound dragon ritual, I don't recommend that too many people go. Yin Nuoxing said this sentence out of nowhere, startling Yi Daofeng and the others. Why? Yi Ding didn't understand. The profound dragon ritual was a grand occasion for the entire empire, and also a grand occasion for the profound dragon continent. When the time came, all the important people of the empire would go back to participate. It was a very sacred event. Why? Yin Nuoxing was dumbfounded. She looked at Yi Ding and the others in disbelief. She couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, Did you guys get too excited and forget about something that's still 500 miles away? Yi Ding and the others were stunned. Then they all smiled bitterly. They seemed to have really forgotten about it in their excitement. Chapter 486. At night, Yin Nuoxing sat quietly in a secret room. His 6 wings flapped gently behind his back, making thunderous sounds. If it weren't for the fact that this secret room had excellent sound insulation, anyone within 100 meters would be able to hear this terrifying sound. Just as Yishi had said, Yin Nuoxing's cultivation caused too much of a commotion. It was as if a thundercloud was randomly rumbling. After being busy for an entire day, Yin Nuoxing finally had the time to sit down and cultivate. After adjusting his condition to his best state, Yin Nuoxing took out the soul-condensing battle talisman that he had spent 10 million to buy. His tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. Brilliant colors shone in front of his eyes. A few small formations condensed in front of his eyes. Through these formations, he could clearly see everything inside the talisman. The talisman wasn't very big. It was only a little longer than a palm and 3 fingers wide. The azure talisman paper was filled with some energy patterns that he couldn't understand. Although Yin Nuoxing couldn't understand them, he could understand some of them. Every energy pattern contained an extremely large amount of power. After looking at it for a long time, he even felt that this thing was somewhat similar to a talisman. Little she. Suddenly, Yin Nuoxing opened his mouth and called out softly. The stone door of the secret room was opened a dozen or so seconds later. Then, a petite figure in a black dress flashed in and casually closed the stone door. After Yishi came in, she didn't say anything. She directly walked to the stone bed where Yin Nuoxing was sitting cross-legged. She looked at the talisman floating in the air and reached out her small hand, which was wrapped in a wide sleeve, to take the azure talisman. Yin Nuoxing glanced at her, then said, "Talismans and talismans. Are there any similarities between the two?" Hearing this, Yishi shook her head. She climbed onto Yin Nuoxing's stone bed and sat down. Her 2 small legs dangled in the air as she said, "Talismans and talismans have nothing to do with each other, but talismans and talismans may have some connection." Cursed talisman? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Talismans. Talismans, as the name suggests, came from a long time ago, probably during the ancient era, when talisman masters were a very popular profession, comparable in status to the current alchemists and array masters. Yishi pondered for a moment, mulling over the matter in her mind. Talismans and formation diagrams are somewhat similar. The former evolves various profound skills into vein patterns that gather energy. Then, those hundreds and thousands of vein patterns are written on talisman paper to form a talisman. However, the activation of a talisman requires an incantation. When the two are combined, it becomes a talisman. It can trigger a powerful attack without consuming energy. It is extremely effective in battle. After saying this, Yishi paused for a moment and scratched her head in distress. Yin Nuoxing knew that she might have forgotten, so she reached out to rub her beautiful hair and laughed. Just as she was about to speak, she saw a flash in Yishi's eyes and continued speaking. Then, with the passage of time, the talisman was transformed in the hands of a peerless expert. The energy vein patterns that should have been written on the talisman paper were engraved in the mind. Then, through the incantation, the talisman could be engraved in the void, directly triggering a powerful attack. Furthermore, it only consumed a little bit of mental energy. There was no need to constantly write on the talisman paper, which was more convenient and faster. At this time, the talisman became a talisman incantation. However, both of them required a few seconds or even tens of seconds of chanting. And all the way until now, there isn't even a need for an incantation. One can directly use mental energy to engrave the energy veined patterns in the void. Of course, the time spent hasn't changed. Although it has changed, there are still people who are used to calling it a talisman incantation. Thus, this name has been retained. Of course, calling it a talisman or rune is also fine. After all, it has become like this, and it has completely nothing to do with a talisman. Even the current rune can turn profound skills, elements, willpower, comprehension, memory, energy, and even formations into energy vein patterns. Looking at this talisman, it seems to achieve the same result through a different method. Of course, there are very few talisman incantation masters now, turning everything energy or non-physical into energy vein patterns, from simple to complex and back to simple again, is a rune. Talisman incantation masters require a stronger comprehension than formation incantation masters. This is also the reason why Brother Nuaw has learned more than 10 types of divine grade, profound cultivation methods, and profound skills. His comprehension is definitely not weak. He can try to see if he can become a talisman incantation master. As for the grades of talisman incantation masters, they are similar to formation incantation masters. However, the grades seem to be determined by how many talismans are engraved in the void at one time. I don't know more about it. By the way, although Brother Nuaw's crappy inheritance formation is also a divine grade ceiling formation, and there are talismans inside, Brother Nuaw doesn't understand talismans at all. Thus, he can't use that portion of power. After saying that, Yishi even spread out her hands in a rather regretful manner and sighed softly. This made Yin Nuashing smile bitterly. How could he have so much energy to cultivate both formations and talismans? Just playing with formations was enough to tire him mentally, let alone cultivating talismans. Spare me. That's another topic. If it's a talisman, it's like a talisman incantation drawn on a piece of paper. That's why I said that the two might be slightly related, Yishi continued. Then if I directly comprehend this talisman, will I be able to learn talismans? Yin Nuashing asked. Yishi was startled. Her cheeks twitched slightly. In theory, it might be possible. Then I'll give it a try. Yin Nuashing nodded. Hearing that, Yishi's expression became a bit strange. She turned around and saw that he was seriously beginning to analyze this talisman. She was also a bit speechless. She couldn't help but ask, "Are you hiding something from me?" Yin Nuashing nodded and said, "I'm not hiding anything. It's just an idea that I just came up with. I want to try it out. If it works, then it'll be great. If it doesn't work, then I'll ask for your help." Is that so? Yishi grabbed his long hair. I want to fuse talismans, and formations together to form a new fusion object. It can exist in one's mind and be activated at any moment. There's no need to inscribe it in battle, Yin Nuashing said indifferently. Hearing that, Yishi blinked her crystalline eyes. Her little mouth couldn't help but form an O shape. Even the little hand that grabbed his long hair was trembling slightly. Only after a long time did she manage to squeeze out a word from her throat. The formation diagram can be inscribed first and can be activated directly. The talisman can convert all profound skills, wills, elements, and formations into simple energy patterns. The talisman can inscribe runes in one's mind. But on the other hand, the formation diagram needs to be prepared in advance. The talisman has to be inscribed in battle. Although it's only for a few seconds, it's enough to be fatal. So I'm thinking whether or not I can fuse the three main characteristics of the formation diagram, the talisman, and the talisman, so that they could be inscribed in one's mind and used directly in battle. Yin Nuashing's bold idea left Yishi speechless. This was definitely an extremely crazy idea. Since ancient times, there were probably not many people who had this kind of idea. This was because no one dared to think about it. Formations, talismans, and talismans, three things from different fields. If they were combined together, what would be born? Although Yishi had seen that Yin Nuaw had once fused 4 spirit designs together. That was 4 spirit designs. At the very least, they were products of the same domain. But this time, what he wanted to move were products of 3 different domains. Although she knew that Yin Nuashing was crazy, she didn't expect him to be crazy to this extent. You want to use your mind as talisman paper and inscribe talismans that can be detonated at any time. Yishi was completely convinced. She kept feeling that Yin Nuashing's crazy upper limit was constantly being refreshed. Amen, I want to give it a try. Yin Nuashing nodded. Crazy guy? A helpless voice came from his body and beside him. This made Yin Nuashing smile faintly. If he was crazy, then he was crazy. Even if he failed, it wasn't anything serious. At worst, he could just give up. Then I'll play with Big Brother Nuaw. I'm also very curious about what the final product will be. If it really succeeds, I'm afraid it will be recorded in the history of the realm of the gods. After a long time, Yishi finally calmed down. She looked at Yun Nuoxing's quiet side profile and laughed helplessly. "Call me if you need anything," Z said. "Amen." Yun Nuoxing smiled. To be honest, if he were to do this himself, there was a 90% chance that he would fail. Combining 3 different things into the same thing was impossible. Big brother Nuo, can the evil spirit I allow others to see the formation together? Yishi asked as she tugged on Yun Nuoxing's cloak. Amen, if the eye formation is opened, it will allow many people to see it at the same time. However, at the same time, the load on me will also increase. Yun Nuoxing nodded. As if he realized what Yishi was thinking, he continued, however, the energy required to maintain 5 people is still doable. The star energy is enough for me to squander for a while. Yishi nodded, then ran out. Not long after, she called Zian and the others over. After she explained everything clearly, the degree of shock on their faces wasn't any less than the one she had shown just now. "Brother, I'll definitely help you. Don't stop me, or else I'll get angry with you." She patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder and nodded. Zian didn't say anything. Yun Nuoxing's position was equivalent to her position. As for Qin Yin, after thinking for a while, she originally wanted to withdraw. This was a matter between Yun Nuoxing and the others. In fact, they weren't close enough to her to tell her such a secret. Qin Yin also wanted to withdraw. Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing slammed the door to the secret room and smiled coldly. "You've already boarded the pirate ship, and you still want to get off?" Qin Yin, who had just turned around, couldn't help but stare blankly after hearing this. Soon after, she burst out laughing. Mei Mao couldn't hide the joy in her eyes. Did this mean that he recognized her as a friend? "Big sister Qin Yin, let's go together. My strength and comprehension aren't enough, so I'll be more of a hindrance instead." Zian stuck out her tongue and wrapped her arms around Qin Yin's arm, looking quite intimate. Qin Yin couldn't help but laugh. She nodded and looked at Yun Nuoxing with a smile. "Then this little girl will respectfully accept." Yun Nuoxing also laughed. She waved her hand and widened her eyes. The 2 small arrays that were originally rotating in front of her suddenly enlarged by a lot, becoming about 3 meters in size. Then, she snapped her fingers, and the heaven refining array appeared out of thin air. Some dark green talismans also slowly appeared. When she first fused the arrays, only the 10,000 spirits killing array had talismans. The other arrays didn't have talismans, and when she fused them, Yun Nuoxing didn't touch those talismans, so they retained their original appearance and effects. She shrunk the heaven refining array to 5 feet in size, then peeled off a talisman from it and threw the soul condensing battle talisman onto it. The 3 objects stood in a triangle in the void. Through the array of the evil spirit eye, they could see some densely packed objects constantly moving. If they used their soul power to lightly touch them, a huge amount of information would be sent back. They threw the immortal grade and even saint grade Xian crystals on the ground. The energy that filled the air made it so that they didn't have to worry about energy consumption. After doing all this, Yun Nuoxing and the others also sat down in a row. They took a deep breath, and several soul powers burst out at the same time, entering the array of the evil spirit spring. Then, each of them carried several small arrays and rushed towards the 3 items. Chapter 487. A huge amount of information rushed into their minds like a charging army, causing their souls to tremble slightly. Only Yun Nuoxing and Yi Shi, who were already used to it, reacted in an instant. Then, their slightly sluggish soul power pounced on the talismans and charms like wolves and tigers. The first thing that Yun Nuoxing took out was the Azure Talisman. Talismans and charms could transform mystic skills, elements, willpower, comprehension, memories, energy, and even formations into energy patterns. The only difference was that the former was engraved on a talisman paper, while the latter was engraved in one's mind. However, the charms that Yun Nuoxing took out weren't pure charms. They were derived from formations. Moreover, He hadn't fully comprehended this formation yet. Perhaps there was a huge difference between it and a real talisman. Therefore, he planned to start with the talisman first. He wanted to know how mystic skills were transformed into energy patterns. I don't understand. Looking at the black ink that was formed by the yellow streams gathering together in front of him, Yin Nuoxing felt like his head was about to explode. This didn't look like a formation. After it was fully unfolded, he could see what was inside each pattern and how it was formed. In these infinitely magnified lines, he could only see the yellow energy flowing in a fixed direction. Looking at the yellow traces in a daze, Yin Nuoxing sighed bitterly and narrowed his vision. The azure talisman appeared completely in front of him and occupied his entire vision. Then, a piece of paper and a brush appeared in his hand. Since he couldn't understand it, he would use the dumbest method, copying. Back when he was learning about spirit designs, he had also carved them on the ground stroke by stroke. He did not know how long it had taken him to comprehend some of them, and from there, he had learned half of the 10,000 spirits killing array. Now he was going to use the dumbest method to do it again. Yin Nuoxing boasted that his talent in learning any skill was very good. Of course, just from his talent in formations, he was indeed very good. Even Yishi praised him. However, he didn't know how good he was in other aspects. While Yin Nuoxing was using the dumbest method, in the other two places, Yishi stared at the spinning talisman. Xian, Qin and Yuan, she chose the simplest method, formations. Of course, this was the simplest method. It was only slightly simpler compared to these three items. They had to learn the basics first before they could look at the rest. In the hall, Yi Ding and Yi Yun saw that the five of them didn't move after entering the secret room. They didn't seem like they would come out for a while, so they left after sitting for a while. They ordered people to seal this place and sent a few maids over. At this moment, a commotion suddenly broke out in the 7 armies that were stationed 500 kilometers away from Dragon City. In a certain military tent, Qianghai seemed to have been provoked by something and smashed a wooden table with his palm. He was so angry that his face flushed red. His fierce gaze swept past a few generals, and a low roar came from his throat as he walked out of the military tent. The generals in the tent were all dumbfounded. They looked at each other for a while and shook their heads in confusion. They didn't know why Qianghai suddenly went crazy. This is only the vanguard. The elites of the 7 armies should still be in their respective empires, right? Are you worried that someone will raid their nest? I'm just worried. The general in the tent sighed. Not long after he finished speaking, a soldier walked in. When he saw that Qianghai wasn't there, he couldn't help but be startled. If you have something to say, just say it. When the person who had just spoken saw the soldier, he waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry." Hearing this, the soldier nodded and knelt down on one knee. The part of the army that belongs to the Yun family has retreated. We have lost the support of the talisman. What? The generals were all startled. Then they all understood. No wonder Qianghai was so furious. He must have received the news first. However, the imperial family of the Xingzhou Empire had always been on good terms with the Yun family. Even if the Yun family suddenly retreated, the imperial family couldn't say anything. However, the 7 armies that had lost the support of the talisman seemed to be in an awkward situation. Since Qianghai dared to say that he would retreat 500 kilometers away, he naturally had the confidence to rush back in a short time. However, without the talisman, these 500 kilometers were really uncomfortable. Report. Suddenly, before the generals could react, an extremely urgent voice came from outside the tent. It was so urgent that the generals thought that they were being attacked. "What are you doing in such a panic?" The generals were very unhappy and scolded. The soldier who just rushed in directly knelt on the ground and stammered, General Tian, he is holding the commander's seal, saying to retreat." This time, it was General Tian He's turn to be dumbfounded. Before he could pull the soldier up and scold him, he heard a stern voice coming from outside. "Tian He army, retreat." When General Tian He heard this voice, he was completely stunned. It was really the voice of the general. He didn't bother to greet him and hurriedly ran outside. After a while, he saw that the 100,000 soldiers of the Sky River Empire had already lined up and were marching in the direction of the Sky River Empire in an orderly manner. On a small hill, General Tian, he also saw the majestic General Tian, he riding on a horse. However, this Sky River general looked a little strange. His sky blue armor was not properly worn, his eyes were bruised, and there was a thumb-sized bump on his forehead. There were still some bloodstains at the corner of his mouth, and his shoulder-length hair was trimmed to only reach his ears. General, the troops are retreating. The Sky River Empire won't participate in this matter. Seeing General Tian, he's dumbfounded. Look, General Tian, he cursed in his heart, but on the surface, he said coldly. He then turned his horse around and walked towards the front of the army. As he walked, he couldn't help but touch his forehead and murmur, "It hurts so much. Those 9 devils." General Tian, he shuddered, then smiled bitterly and hurriedly followed. Although they didn't know what happened, even the commanders of the other 6 armies were a little curious. Did they really get robbed? Report. The Sky River Empire's army hadn't gone far yet when another soldier stumbled towards the 6 commanders. However, as soon as he knelt down and adjusted his helmet, before he could speak, he saw a stream of light flying towards them from the horizon, causing the commanders to turn their heads in shock. The person who came was wearing a green robe. The cloak behind him was cut into dozens of pieces, fluttering in the air. His thick black hair was parted in the middle, and his bangs were neatly cut off. Even his green robe was cut in the shape of a cross. Flaming Sun Empire, retreat. Just as everyone was stunned by the appearance of the azure-clothed man, the azure-clothed man took out a sun-like mark from his bosom. His shout spread throughout the entire army, causing the Flaming Sun Empire's commander to shiver. He felt that something was wrong. First, the Sky River Empire retreated, and now even the Flaming Sun Empire retreated? General, what happened? Seeing the general's appearance, the Flaming Sun Empire's commander couldn't help but take a deep breath and ask. The Flaming Sun Empire's general glanced at him and coldly snorted. He was very angry at this time, and this question directly poked his sore spot. He couldn't help but slap the commander's face and throw him away, then coldly snorted. "You're asking me? Why should I ask a ghost?" Then, without looking back, he flew towards the Flaming Sun Empire. At this time, the Flaming Sun Empire's army was already in formation. The Flaming Sun Empire's commander didn't know whether to laugh or cry, then led his 100,000 soldiers towards the Flaming Sun Empire. Is there a ghost? The remaining 5 commanders were stunned. They didn't know what happened that made the 2 empires retreat at the same time. Of course, even if the 2 empires were gone, they still had 500,000 soldiers. It was more than enough to take down the dragon Mist Empire. Just as the 5 commanders were thinking this, they saw Qianghaya walk back with a gloomy face. He walked in front of one of the commanders and fiercely glared at that person, then said, "Star Empire, retreat." This time, the 5 commanders were all stunned. Their jaws hit the ground, creating a huge hole. They really didn't understand what was going on. First, 2 empires retreated. Now, even the Xingzhou Empire, which was leading the army, was retreating. General, this... Commander Xing Zhao's whole body trembled. He clenched his teeth, still wanting to know what happened. At this time, Qianghaya had a belly full of anger. Seeing the commander's confused expression, he couldn't help but directly slap him. That commander directly spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out. I said retreat. Qianghaya's cold voice made the commander who had just crawled to his feet shiver. He didn't say anything else and quickly nodded before running towards the Star Zhao Empire's army. In less than half an hour, this place that had been filled with 700,000 soldiers suddenly lost 300,000 soldiers. The commanders standing on the hill were dumbfounded and hurriedly rubbed their eyes, thinking that they had fallen into an illusion. When they saw that it wasn't an illusion, they couldn't help but blush and blurt out vulgarities. Go play with your eggs. At this time, in the imperial palace of the Sky River Empire, millions of miles away, a young man wearing a bright golden robe was sitting on the main seat of the main hall. Looking at the man in a golden robe who was beaten to a pulp, he jumped down from the main seat, squatted in front of the ladder, and grinned. "Uncle, are you really going to retreat?" Hearing these seemingly immature words, the group of sky-blue armored soldiers lying on the ground trembled. The golden-robed man even trembled as he nodded his head. My lord, the great general will retreat with the commander's seal. There will definitely be no problem." "Huh. You said that your Sky River Empire has ruled this area for hundreds of thousands of years. How come you don't have anything good?" The brawny man in a blue robe not far away looked at the so-called treasure in front of him and sighed helplessly. His words made the man in a golden robe tremble fiercely, but he didn't dare to have any complaints. He didn't even dare to think about it. Sir, how can the simple things in my humble house be worthy of your attention?" The man in a golden robe trembled all over. He is usually high and mighty, in charge of the affairs of the empire. As the night approached, he was just about to have a good sleep, but he didn't expect that someone would break in and beat him up without saying a word. These people are too ruthless, not to mention the pain, but they didn't cause any internal injuries. It's simply a textbook example of "you can't die." Even the general of the Sky River Empire, who came to rescue the emperor, was beaten to a pulp. When those people finally stopped, they called for a retreat and asked to see the treasure. The Sky River Emperor was also a little confused. He didn't know where the dragon Mist Empire found such a powerful helper. With such a powerful helper, shouldn't they have already unified the 8 countries? What happened in the Sky River Empire also happened in the Imperial Palace of the Flaming Sun Empire. Chapter 488. After the Sky River Empire, the Star Empire, and the Flaming Sun Empire retreated at the same time, an inexplicable panic spread to the remaining 4 armies. No one knows what happened, but the remaining 4 armies were shaken. Could it be that the dragon Mist Empire did something to their rear? As a result, some people from the 4 armies ran back to the empire overnight and brought back the news of the 3 armies' retreat. Although the 4 great empires were a little uneasy, they still chose to wait and see. When the 4 armies received this news, they didn't know what to say for a while. Regarding this, Yin Nuoxing didn't know anything. He didn't know that Yao Hua and Nightmare would be so impatient. They didn't even wait for him to inform them before fighting. At this time, he was immersed in studying the spirit talisman. He didn't comprehend anything after a night, but he felt that he already grasped some clues. As long as he continues to follow the clues, it's only a matter of time before he comprehends it. Every energy pattern is moving in a specific direction. It's like a meridian, but it's not like it's breaking down every strand of the mystical skill into lines. Yin Nuoxing stared at the soul-consolidating battle talisman in front of him that he copied 100 times. He more or less understood a little, but he still felt a little tired. He couldn't help but sigh. "Let's take a break." Putting down his dancing hands, Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. After withdrawing from the evil spirit well, he went to check on Yao Hua and the others' progress. At this time, Yao Hua and the others were very focused on the array in front of them. Their 6 eyes were glowing with a strange light. They seemed to have a little understanding of the array. Seeing them so focused, Yin Nuoxing didn't want to disturb them. Just as he was about to leave quietly, he saw a piece of the array quietly retreating. Then Xian, who had been sitting quietly, opened her eyes. A trace of fatigue flashed in Mei Mao's eyes. "Huh!" After opening Mei Mao's eyes, Xian stood up and stretched her waist. Her full curves were perfectly wrapped by the purple robe, making Yin Nuoxing, who was peeking from the side, dumbfounded. Her sparkling skin, high twin peaks, and slender waist made someone unable to take his eyes off her. In the end, he hurriedly covered his eyes with his hands and turned his gaze away. "How is it?" After a moment, he turned his gaze back and saw Xian rubbing her eyes in a daze. Yin Nuoxing smiled as if nothing had happened. Hearing the voice, Xian turned her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing. She smiled sweetly. In an instant, the light of the array dimmed a lot. Yin Nuoxing's eyes lit up. She then said, "It's okay. I can understand a little. Give me some more time, and I should be able to understand it. It's been hard for you to comprehend a divine array when you just came into contact with arrays." Yin Nuoxing smiled. Hearing this, Xian also smiled slightly and didn't say anything. Since Yin Nuoxing needed help, she had to do her part no matter how difficult it was. She also felt that her head was swelling, which was why she had no choice but to leave the array. Xian turned her head and looked at the array not far away. He couldn't help but murmur, "How profound! Every light pattern contains the power of the elements, the will of the elements, the vitality of wood, the speed of light, the burning of fire, the hardness of metal, and the softness of water. The 5 elemental wills are like the pivot, connecting all the energy carriers and elemental power into a whole." A whole? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. A whole! A whole! Suddenly, the large and scattered pieces of information in his mind seemed to have found a point of convergence, and the information floating outside also slowly gathered together. His gaze suddenly turned, and he stared fixedly at the azure spirit talisman. The spirit talisman in his eyes seemed to be slightly different. He had spent the entire night dismantling the spirit talisman, looking at it in different parts, and then copying it. However, whether it was the mystic technique, the array, the will, the elements, they were all a whole at this moment. Yin Nuoxing seemed to have a switch in her mind that had been pressed. Her previously blocked train of thought was immediately cleared up. I'm not looking at it separately. This spirit talisman is a whole. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed, and she couldn't help but say, "I seem to have understood something." Xian was stunned. Then, she saw Yin Nuoxing's eyes flash with excitement. She was just about to speak when she felt herself crashing into a warm embrace. She was so frightened that her delicate body stiffened. "Thank you, Xian." Yin Nuoxing hugged Xian fiercely. However, his mind was filled with thoughts about the spirit talisman. He didn't realize what he was doing at all. He only felt that many thoughts in his mind were suddenly connected, and many things were logically connected. When Xian heard this, he was a little happy in his heart. However, he was still a little confused. He didn't realize that just one sentence had broken the barrier that had troubled Yin Nuoxing for an entire night. However, when she saw the two of them in this position, her pretty face blushed a little. After her delicate body stiffened for a while, she slowly relaxed. Her jade-like hand circled around Yin Nuoxing's back, and she gently patted him on the back. She softly called out, "Little star." After a long while, Yin Nuoxing came back to his senses. When he heard this voice, he turned his head and saw Xian looking at him with a faint smile. His expression couldn't help but stiffen. He seemed to have just remembered what he was doing. His handsome face couldn't help but blush. He gave a dry laugh and hurriedly let go of Wenyu in his arms. I couldn't help it." "That's right, I couldn't help it." Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and gave a dry laugh. "Yes, I couldn't help it." Xian nodded and smiled sweetly. This made him smile even more bitterly. Glancing at Yuan Shi and the other two who were still trying hard to understand, Yin Nuoxing thought for a while. He fiddled with the pile of Xian crystals and the evil spirit eye array for a while. Then he clapped his hands and said to himself, "Switch the array's energy source from me to Xian crystals. This way, I don't need to maintain the energy output." Yin Nuoxing nodded. However, his eyes were still colorful. The evil spirit eye wasn't closed. He just changed the array to another place. "I'm going to the Yin family. Xian, do you want to stay or come with me?" Yin Nuoxing stood up and looked at Xian, who was so quiet that she didn't have a sense of existence. Hearing this, Xian only gave a dry laugh. She held his hand and squeezed it hard. Yin Nuoxing immediately understood. He nodded and didn't say anything else. He pulled Xian into his arms and stomped his feet. An array suddenly appeared and started to spin rapidly. A bright white light enveloped the two of them. Finally, the array suddenly flashed and disappeared with Yin Nuoxing and Yin Nuoxing. Buzz! The place where the array appeared was 1,000,000 miles away from the Dragon Mist Empire. It wasn't very far from Xingzhou City. They could see a city on the horizon. Surging wind elements lifted the two of them up. At this time, Xian turned around and saw that Xingzhou City wasn't far away. He couldn't help but be startled. He said in surprise, "We're here already?" "Yes." Yin Nuoxing smiled and said, The array that little she taught me is a teleportation array. However, it's at the god level. I haven't fully comprehended it and don't have the power of space. Therefore, the array I used is incomplete. Little she said that if I'm proficient in this array, I'll be able to go to any place I've been before. I just need to consume enough power of space and energy. Therefore, we didn't go directly to the Yun family. Instead, we stopped outside Xingzhou City. Zian said softly, yes. Yun Nuoxing scratched his head awkwardly. He wasn't proficient in it, so he reached his teleportation limit before reaching his destination. Of course, this also saved him 1,000,000 miles of travel. However, it also consumed 60% of the power of stars in his body. After resting for a while, Yun Nuoxing didn't waste too much time and flew directly to the Yun family. He directly flew over Xingzhou City and rushed into the Yun family. He didn't hide his aura, so he was discovered as soon as he entered. Yun Feng rushed out directly with a red talisman in his hand. The talisman seemed to have been carved halfway. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to make such a big fuss. He followed Yun Feng and the others to the main hall and sat down to sip some tea. Then, Yun Nuoxing said, "There's no problem with this year's Mystery Dragon ritual. Even if there's a problem, it will continue as normal." When Yun Feng and the others heard this, their mouths were almost scalded by the tea. They all looked at Yun Nuoxing as if they were looking at a monster. He had only gone back for 2 days. How did he get it done so quickly? What about the Dragon Mist Empire that had been struggling for almost 4 years and still couldn't find the sacred relic? Ignoring the astonished gazes, Yun Nuoxing drank his tea indifferently. Before he came to the Yin family last time, he had already settled Jun Luo Yi's illness. However, after going back for 2 days, it seemed a little scary. It made Yin Feng think that Yun Nuoxing had settled this difficult illness in just 2 days. After hearing Yun Nuoxing say that they would be participating in the Mystery Dragon ritual in the Dragon Mist Empire, Yin Feng heaved a sigh of relief and told him about the invasion of the 7 armies. Originally, the Yin family had also participated in the Xingzhou Empire's army. However, they had completely withdrawn now. Even the Xingzhou Empire's army had withdrawn. Yun Nuoxing looked at him in surprise and said casually, "Fortunately, I almost wiped out the 700,000-strong army." Yin Feng and the others' faces twitched. Then they smiled bitterly. Anyway, this guy was a living ancestor. He would do whatever he said. They just didn't know why he was here this time. They didn't think that he was just here to report. "I want to learn about talismans." When Yun Feng heard Yun Nuoxing's words, even the former couldn't help but stiffen. This was really unexpected. He had imagined many reasons for Yun Nuoxing to visit the Yun family, but this was the only one he didn't think of. "Of course, there will be a reward. I won't let you teach me for free." Seeing that they were all silent, Yun Nuoxing waved his hand and casually took out a piece of high-quality crystal that weighed about 50 kilograms. The rich energy immediately spread out. Yun Feng and the others took a sniff and felt that the energy directly poured into their bodies through their noses. They even felt that their cells were cheering. This surprised him. His strength, which had been stagnant for many years, actually showed signs of rising slightly. Yun Nuoxing just happened to put it away. The energy contained in a 50-kilogram piece of high-quality crystal was enough for a Devil Realm expert to cultivate once. For an Immortal Realm expert, they might not even be able to drain it dry after cultivating for hundreds of times. Yun Nuoxing originally thought that Yun Feng and the others would refuse, but he didn't expect that they would agree immediately. Moreover, he would teach them personally, which made Yun Nuoxing a little surprised. After reaching an agreement, he directly took Yun Nuoxing to the stone room and finished carving the red talisman in front of them. Then he took out another piece of talisman paper and carved it very slowly. While carving, he also explained the precautions when carving the talisman. However, most of the time, he let the 2 of them comprehend it. After carving, when the 2 of them were almost done, he detonated it. Then he carved it again and detonated it again. He repeated this for about 5 talismans. Before Yun Feng could detonate the 6th talisman, he saw that Yun Nuoxing and Xian were actually carving very seriously. They were carving the talisman that he had repeatedly carved 6 times. Although it was very slow, every stroke seemed to have a charm. Moreover, they were mixed with other energy, which made Yun Feng a little speechless. He was carving a level 8 talisman, which had a very high starting point. He originally thought that Yun Nuoxing and Xian would take some time to comprehend it, but he didn't expect that they would comprehend it in just an hour, this kind of monstrous talent. It's not something that a human can have. Yun Feng's cheeks twitched as he carefully watched the 2 of them carving the talisman. Yun Nuoxing's talisman carving was firm and stable, but her speed was not very slow. On the other hand, Xian's talisman carving was very gentle, like a feather brushing across the paper, which had a different kind of beauty. Both of them are not bad. Now that they understand how to transform magical powers into lines, it will be easier in the future. Seeing that the 2 of them had carved half a talisman in a short while, Yun Feng nodded with satisfaction. Then, he felt a little regretful. How good would it be if he could take these 2 as his disciples? This learning process lasted for 2 full days. During these 2 days, what they did was to draw talismans, detonate talismans, draw talismans, detonate talismans, detonate talismans, detonate talismans, detonate talismans, detonate talismans. Yun Nuoxing and Xian's speed of carving talismans became faster and faster. In the end, he even felt that everything he saw could be seen as energy lines. He even tried to transform divine-grade mystic skills into energy lines, but he failed repeatedly. Basically, when he drew 1/3 of the talismans, they would automatically explode. Fortunately, he had many divine weapons on him. Otherwise, he would have been injured all over. After staying here for another day, Yun Nuoxing and Xian left, leaving behind a 100-kilogram fine-grade glazed crystal. Rather than saying that it was left behind, it was better to say that it was thrown out. After all, Yun Feng didn't accept it. Patriarch, this energy crystal. An elder stood in front of the huge, fine-grade glazed crystal and smiled bitterly. He looked at Yun Feng, who was watching Yun Nuoxing and Xian leave, and asked. Yun Feng turned his head to take a look in a daze. Then he turned back and lowered his head to look at the ring lying in the palm of his hand. There were a total of 1,000 talismans stored in the ring. Those talismans were the result of Yun Nuoxing and Xian's 3 days of hard work. From the beginning, they were not very good at drawing talismans, but later on, they became flamboyant. It only took them 3 days to go from beginner to proficient. Yun Nuoxing and Xian's progress made Yun Feng, who had been watching, want to buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. In the end, the 2 of them drew talismans faster than him. What was even more exaggerated was that while Yun Nuoxing was drawing talismans with her hands, she was actually drawing talismans with her divine sense at the same time. It wasn't a problem for her to draw 20 talismans at once. Moreover, the talismans she drew were flawless. Seal it. The core disciples of the family can use it to cultivate for 10 days every month. The other disciples can use it depending on the situation. If the 2 of them want to use it for extra time, they can use the talismans to exchange for time. As for the specifics, you can arrange. Yun Feng's voice was stiff, as if he had become a different person. This made the elders behind him confused. They didn't know what had happened in just 3 days. Why was the patriarch a little sluggish? Could it be that the 2 of them weren't promising talents? Of course, it was fortunate that they didn't know. Otherwise, they would probably be petrified on the spot. Chapter 489. After leaving the Yin residence, Yun Nuoxing and Xian did not waste any time on the road. They directly opened the array and returned to the palace. However, they did not rush into the secret room to continue cultivating. After spending 3 days learning talismans, Yun Nuoxing had made considerable progress. She felt that it was not bad. She boasted that she was not much worse than those level 9 talisman masters. Of course, if Yun Feng knew about this, he would probably slap her to death. One had to know that the latter was a level 9 talisman master himself, and Yun Nuoxing was much faster and more accurate than him. If she still received an evaluation of not bad, Yin Feng would probably have to draw a bunch of talismans and press them against the wall to smash his head against it. Xian was not as crazy as Yin Nuoxing. She followed the rules and used her spiritual power to draw 20 talismans at the same time. However, she always maintained a constant speed. At most, she would draw 10 talismans at the same time. Her strokes were graceful, as if she was caressing them gently. Sitting on the sofa and resting with her eyes closed, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt that it was time to cultivate a mystic technique related to spiritual power. Although she could also recover her spiritual power by relying on the special characteristics of the divine body, it was relatively slower. Looking at the 2 rings on her fingers, Yin Nuoxing felt that they were a little heavy. What was left behind was not only Xuaning's treasures, but also her endless longing for him. Suddenly, she missed that girl a little. Yin Nuoxing never touched the things in the rings casually. In fact, he was avoiding it. He knew that the silver figure loved him, but he intentionally or unintentionally distanced himself from her feelings. He just buried it in the bottom of his heart and did not even want to touch the rings. Ini, where are you? Are you okay? How are you doing? Yin Nuoxing's fingers gently turned the 2 rings as she inexplicably muttered this sentence in her heart. Even Yin Nuoxing herself was shocked. Sighing softly, Yin Nuoxing shook her head. Her gaze wandered for a while before she withdrew it. Her spiritual power invaded the rings and wandered among the countless treasures buried in them. Although this ring was said to be a spatial storage, Yin Nuoxing felt that it was more like an endless world. After her soul entered the ring, she could clearly see that the light and color in the ring were flowing in a fixed direction. It was like a river, but what was flowing was not water, but space and even time. Yes, it was just like this feeling. Space and time were flowing. The 2 illusory things had turned into substance and were flowing. And in this flowing space, balls of light were floating. Inside those balls of light were the treasures left behind by Xianin, elixirs, formation diagrams, crystals, materials, prescriptions, arrays, mystic arts, mystic skills, and all kinds of random things. Everything was there. This was also one of the reasons why Yin Nuoxing did not dare to come in. There were too many things here, and they were all very precious. They were so precious that whenever he took out a mystic art from the balls of light, it would be either a peerless or divine art. Every time, he would be so scared that he would throw it away and let it be wrapped up by the balls of light again. Looking at this brilliant place, Yin Nuoxing sighed. Her spiritual power quickly spread out, but she was shocked to find that without much effort, her spiritual power could cover a very far place in an instant. It was as if her spiritual power was infinitely magnified in this place. And with the help of these 10 seconds of sensing, Yin Nuoxing captured many balls of light that resonated with her spiritual power. The things inside seemed to be related to her spiritual power. Picking the one with the strongest resonance, Yin Nuoxing rushed there in a flash. Her hand reached into the ball of light and grabbed a slightly cold scroll. It was so cold that she shivered. She hurriedly took it out. The scroll that came out of the ball of light was 6 colors. Furthermore, the 6 colors were rotating inside the scroll like a whirlpool. It was very magical. 6 paths of reincarnation technique. Looking at the name, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt that her soul and spirit were about to sink into the scroll. A gust of darkness even swept towards her. The deathly aura of reincarnation corroded her body. Reincarnation, reincarnation. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing felt like he was about to completely fall into the cycle of reincarnation. That scroll had an irresistible force that was pulling him, wanting to make him fall into the endless cycle of reincarnation. He seemed to have seen a part of his life. He lived like an ordinary person, watching the sunrise and sunset, drifting away from the world. He lived alone, forever. Wake up. A clear voice suddenly sounded, waking him up uncontrollably. The image in front of him dissipated. Yin Nuoxing shivered violently. Biting his lips hard, he quickly shifted his gaze away. What the hell? Yin Nuoxing took a few deep breaths. At that moment, he really felt like he was about to fall into the cycle of reincarnation. He had already sensed an aura that was even stronger than death. That glance felt like millions of years had passed. He lived alone in the world, without any contact or interaction with anyone, forcefully knocking on his wildly beating heart. Yin Nuoxing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. That kind of life was too terrifying. It was no different from death. One person, one person, one person forever. In Ian's voice, he lowered his head and glanced at the scroll again. He looked very carefully and didn't even dare to look directly at it. He was afraid that he would fall into that lonely life. He was afraid that if he experienced it again, he would go crazy. Just as he was carefully looking at the scroll in the corner of his vision, a white light suddenly shot out from the 6 paths of reincarnation technique and landed in front of him. The sudden appearance of the white light startled Yin Nuoxing, but he calmed down after a short while. He quietly looked at the white light. He believed that Xian Yin wouldn't deliberately mystify him and leave him something that he couldn't use. After waiting for more than 10 seconds, the white light turned into a human figure. Her entire body was shining with a silver-white light, and her snow-white, long hair fluttered in the air. It was so thick that it was like a barrier, and her beautiful face was filled with an ancient majesty. However, her beautiful eyes carried a hint of a smile, and this image was so real that it was as if the string sound had arrived in person, causing Yin Nuoxing to be extremely astonished. While he was still astonished, a gentle and familiar pleasant voice unexpectedly slowly sounded in front of him. The familiar voice caused Yin Nuoxing's heart to tremble. Big brother, if you can come into contact with the 6 paths of reincarnation technique and hear my message, then your spirit and soul should already be at the demon rank. Xian Yin congratulates Big Brother first. I wonder where Big Brother is now. What are you fighting for? Are you preparing to step into the small divine lands? Or are you going to head into outer space? When Big Brother is able to open the 6 paths of reincarnation technique, Xian Yin might not be able to free herself, or she might not even be in this world anymore. If Big Brother discovers that the divine seal that Xian Yin left behind is broken one day, then take the final thing left in the divine seal as Xian Yin's final gift to Big Brother. Big Brother only needs to focus on increasing your strength. One day, Big Brother will know everything. Xian Yin won't leave too many words behind. Big Brother, you must remember that cultivating the 6 paths of reincarnation technique requires you to integrate your understanding of life into it. I wonder if Big Brother has seen the reincarnation lake. Every mark in there is a key that can help Big Brother cultivate the 6 paths of reincarnation technique. At this point, Xian Yin's image patted her forehead. Yin Nuoxing suddenly understood that Xian Yin was referring to the marks in the reincarnation disc. His reincarnation disc was covered by countless black marks, and there was no trace of gold. Zi speculated that it had been reincarnated for at least 10,000 lifetimes. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a powerful scene. The 6 paths of reincarnation technique focuses on reincarnation. Although there are other cultivation techniques related to the soul and spirit, this is the most suitable for Big Brother. However, if Big Brother doesn't acknowledge the existence of reincarnation, you must not cultivate it. Also, Big Brother, you don't have to avoid or reject anything. The things inside should belong to Big Brother. Xian Yin's life belongs to Big Brother. Big Brother, you don't have to feel that you owe me anything. It's fine even if you can't accept me. Big Brother, Xian Yin misses you. Take care. At the end of her words, Xian Yin's image rushed over and hugged Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing was shocked. It didn't feel like an image at all. It felt like a physical body. However, he didn't have time to ask anything. He couldn't ask anything. Xian Yin's image directly disappeared in front of him, turning into light spots that filled the sky. He was the only one left in this flowing space. He clenched the cultivation technique in his hands in a daze. After a long time, Yin Nuoxing still stood in the same spot in a daze. His beautiful eyes were a little dull and lifeless, and there seemed to be tears rolling down his cheeks. Bastard, you have the ability to take her things. Why don't you have the ability to remember them? You bastard. Bastard. Yin Nuoxing, you bastard. Yin Nuoxing slapped himself fiercely with the back of his hand. He clenched his teeth and felt that there was a gloomy feeling in his chest that he couldn't let out. Yin Nuashing touched his red cheeks and took a deep breath. He raised his head, and his beautiful eyes gradually came to life. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but he didn't have anyone to say it to. Over and over again, he only felt that his heart was heavy. Those words of longing and waiting, who knew how many years had pressed down on his heart. It made him feel warm, but at the same time, he also felt uncomfortable. He couldn't respond to anything. One day, "I will remember who you are," Yin Nuashing muttered softly as he clutched his chest. After a long while, he finally let out a heavy sigh. Looking at the six-colored scroll in his hand, he clenched his teeth and used all his strength to hit his head, as if he wanted to knock himself unconscious. Of course, the moment the scroll touched his forehead, Yin Nuashing indeed fainted as he wished. In the secret room, Yuan Shi and the other two were immersed in the formation and talismans. The scene in front of them suddenly became blurry, startling them. Before they could retreat from the formation of the evil spirit spring, the formation collapsed, and their vision became completely normal. There was no more sea of light. No more sea of light. Something happened to Brother Nuo. Yishi's small hands trembled, and she hurriedly broke through the door. She was so anxious that she even sent the door flying. The explosion scared the confused Yuan Shi and Qin Yin half to death. When they came back to their senses, they hurriedly turned around and saw that Yishi had blasted a large hole in the stone door of the secret room. They bitterly smiled and hurriedly chased after her. However, the two didn't run far. As soon as they arrived at the living room, they saw Yishi standing there with a strange expression. They hurriedly ran over and saw Yin Nuashing sleeping peacefully on the sofa. Xian was also sitting next to her and sleeping peacefully. They couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. "What? She's just sleeping. Something's wrong." Yishi's eyes suddenly widened as if she had seen something shocking. She pulled Xian over with her small hand and shouted in his mind, "Wake up! Wake up!" Xian was dizzy from the two calls, and his pretty face became a little pale. He opened his main mouth with difficulty, and his eyes were a little empty. When he completely regained consciousness and saw Yishi, he was still a little confused. "Little Shi?" Xian wiped his eyes, and his weak voice startled the three of them. Then, he saw her suddenly widen her eyes and stare at Mei Mao. Her breathing became a little hurried, and her plump chest heaved up and down. Her forehead was actually sweating, and even her delicate body was trembling a little, as if she had seen something terrifying. "What's wrong?" Yishi also didn't understand. The two of them had been gone for 3 days. One was sleeping, and the other looked like she had seen a ghost. Xian swallowed and quickly picked up a teacup on the table and took a big gulp. She was still a little shaken. After she panted for a long time and calmed down a little, Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuashing and murmured in a daze, "A life, years, 1,000 years, ah?" Yi Shi and the others were stunned. Xian shook her head and said, "I just saw a little star fall asleep and wanted to cover myself with a blanket. As soon as I touched little star's body, my consciousness became blurry. No, I was swallowed. Something, little star's soul, pulled me over. I saw a period of time, 1,000 years of life, as if it really happened." Xian's expression was a little painful. She covered her head with her lily-white hands. She couldn't explain it clearly. It wasn't that she saw it, but that she experienced 1,000 years of life. Yishi frowned and gently put Xian on a chair. She walked over to Yin Nuashing until she could hear his breathing. Then she reached out her small hand and touched Yin Nuashing's forehead. However, before she could touch him, Yishi withdrew her small hand like lightning. She took a few steps back and then took a deep breath. Reincarnation. Chapter 490. The pitch-black land was deathly silent. Occasionally, the rumbling of thunder could be heard from the sky. On the cracked land, some small animals were scuttling through the cracks. A mountain range could be vaguely seen in the distance. However, it was also pitch black. Even the withered trees that stood on the ground were similarly pitch black. A black figure slowly walked over from the distant land. He was wearing a black trench coat, black pants, and black shoes. The only difference was that this person had light purple hair. His face that was exposed outside of his clothes was extremely fair, causing the darkness to appear even darker. His light purple and gold eyes were emotionless as he quietly looked at the dusky land. Has the cycle of reincarnation begun? Yin Nuoxing raised his hand. He looked at his overly fair palm and gently squeezed it a few times. Yin Nuoxing looked at the six-colored crystal floating beside him. After a while, he turned his gaze and looked straight ahead. He said indifferently, "What do you want me to see? What is reincarnation?" He seemed to be talking to himself. However, Yin Nuoxing knew that this six-colored crystal should have a consciousness left in it. This six-colored crystal was another medium for the six paths of reincarnation technique. When he slapped the scroll on his forehead, the cultivation, or rather, the cycle of reincarnation, had already begun. The six-colored crystal did not respond. Yin Nuoxing was not in a hurry. Along the way, the crystal also did not speak. However, he was sensitive enough to catch a strand of consciousness. Therefore, he treated it as a conversation partner. However, it was clear that the crystal did not want to pay attention to him. Yin Nuoxing sighed as he looked at the endless black land. He crossed mountains after mountains and black rivers. He ran and walked quickly. He did not know how many tens of thousands of miles had passed. He did not know how much time had passed. He did not know what he was doing here. "I really want to chop you into pieces." Yin Nuoxing glared at the crystal with his light purple and gold eyes. He shook his head helplessly and continued to walk forward. He did not even know where he was going. The crystal did not give him any indication. Once again, he climbed up a tall mountain. When he reached the peak of the mountain, he gazed into the endless distance. It was all pitch black, making him feel helpless. Yin Nuoxing jumped down from the mountain and started running in a straight line. The six-colored crystal followed closely behind, leaving behind a beautiful trail of light as it flew through the air. The only thing that made Yin Nuoxing feel strange was that he didn't feel any energy consumption in this place. His star energy, soul energy, and spiritual energy didn't show any signs of consumption. When he first noticed this, he thought that he was in a dream. He didn't wake up even after slapping himself, and he even felt pain. After running for 1,000 miles, Yin Nuoxing stopped again. He saw a huge withered tree. It was at least 1,000 feet tall and only had a weak aura of life hanging on. However, even the ground had been dead for countless years. This withered tree had no chance of surviving unless a miracle happened. This was supposed to be a world of greenery. Countless lives lived on this land. The emerald green mountains, the azure blue sky, and the free white clouds. It was hard to imagine what had happened to make this place become so barren. It was so barren that there was not a trace of life in it. Yin Nuoxing arrived under the withered tree and gently stroked the huge trunk. He did nothing. Even if he did something, he would not be able to save this dead land. Swish! Yin Nuoxing's eyes trembled when he heard the gentle sound of wind. A gust of wind blew from behind him. Yin Nuoxing did not even look back. A strand of sword qi suddenly appeared between his fingers, and he quickly slashed it behind him. The sword qi collided with the gust of wind, but there was no sound. The gust of wind disappeared, while a 100-meter-long crack appeared on the ground behind him. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and looked at the path ahead of him. After passing through the withered trees, he saw that it was still a plain. However, on the plain, there were many huge black figures. Each of them was at least 5 meters tall. Their scarlet eyes were filled with a tyrannical emotion. The foul wind, just now, seemed to have been spat out by one of the black figures. Magical beasts condensed from the aura of death? I've come to Death Valley? Yin Nuoxing was slightly surprised. He carefully sensed for a moment before shaking his head. He had sensed the aura of death from Yishi before. It was not like this. Turning around, Yin Nuoxing could not help but raise his eyebrows when he saw the endless black beasts that covered the plain. He seemed to be a little tired of walking around aimlessly. Let's move around a little. I'll just hit them, right? Yin Nuoxing twisted his shoulders and cracked his knuckles. With a wave of his hands, the nether void sword and the golden divine sword appeared in front of him. He held them firmly in his hands. Roar, roar, roar. When the two swords appeared, the black beasts that covered the plain became even more violent. Black gusts of wind flew from the distance like cannonballs, completely blocking Yin Nuoxing's line of sight. Shoo, it's going to be a saturation bombing from the beginning. Yin Nuoxing whistled and grinned. He put his hands together and combined the nether void sword and the golden divine sword. Then, he raised them high above his head. A huge amount of energy surged into the two swords like a tide. Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed when he sensed the energy in the swords. He swung them down fiercely, and a fierce shout rang out across the plain. Nether void strike of the firmament. The purplish-gold sword chi that was tens of thousands of meters long destroyed everything it came into contact with unparalleled force. Wherever it swept past, the black ground was sliced in half, leaving behind a deep gash. The sword chi was still expanding rapidly, and it did not take long for it to reach over 1,000,000 meters long. The black beasts that it came into contact with were reduced to black gas before they could even make a sound and vanished into thin air. Explode! A soft shout once again spread across the plains. The sword chi that was millions of feet tall condensed and then exploded with a boom, turning into a storm of destruction that swept across the entire plains. It was like a huge tornado that connected the heavens and the earth. The earth seemed to be experiencing an earthquake, and the originally cracked ground collapsed in patches. Moreover, as the tornado spun, hundreds of thousands or even millions of sharp sword chi shot out from it. Anything that collided with it would explode with a loud bang. It was as if a magnificent firework feast had bloomed in front of Yun Nuo planet. The destructive storm raged for 10 minutes before slowly dissipating. Looking at the devastated land, Yin Nuoxing whistled and muttered to himself in a low voice, "Are they all dead?" However, just as he finished speaking, the collapsed ground slowly rose up. At a speed visible to the naked eye, it returned to its original state. After the ground returned to its original state, countless black beasts appeared out of thin air again. Furthermore, the black beasts that appeared this time were much stronger than the ones before. I went from a mortal 5 to a mortal 6. Could it be that my strength will continue to increase indefinitely? Yin Nuoxing was a little surprised. Feeling the abundant energy in his body, he habitually raised his hands and infused energy into the two huge swords. Before Yin Nuoxing could slash down with the huge swords, his hands stopped abruptly, and the terrifying energy that had gathered gradually dissipated. Well, forget it. With a devilish smile, Yin Nuoxing held the two huge swords in his hands tightly and leaped from the mountain peak into the sky. Roar! Roar! Buzz! Pairs of red eyes stared at Yin Nuoxing's figure as he leaped high into the air. Numerous roars resounded throughout the mountains and plains. There were even some sharp screeches that caused the entire space to tremble. Terrifying demonic aura surged towards the sky and filled the air. Let me personally experience this million-strong army. Yin Nuoxing roared, and a formation appeared beneath his feet. Stepping on the formation, he steadily stopped in the air. Then, with a powerful kick, he descended from the sky like a black bolt of lightning. His two swords flickered with terrifying energy as he slashed downwards. Boom! In the Dragon Mist Imperial Palace, the news of the retreat of the three armies did not remain a secret for long. It reached the ears of Yi Daofeng and the others. However, they were not happy. As the profound dragon ritual approached day by day, the Dragon Mist City was also in turmoil. Other than the murder case that had occurred 2 years ago, there were many more inexplicable incidents. It was likely that some martial king experts were involved. Yi Ding and the others also realized that there seemed to be many unfamiliar experts appearing out of nowhere in the Dragon Mist City. Yi Daofeng and the others had no intention of coming into contact with these unfamiliar guests. However, the recent incidents in the Dragon Mist City seemed to be related to these people. For example, a certain house was inexplicably bombed people went missing, and even the imperial palace members were almost assassinated when they went out. What was even worse was that when Yi Yun went out 3 days before the profound dragon ritual, she was assassinated by a group of black-clothed people who came out of nowhere. All of Yi Yun's guards were killed, and even she escaped with serious injuries. When the current emperor of the empire found out about this, he was even more furious. He personally took action and searched the entire Dragon Mist City to find the assassins. However, before he could interrogate them, those people committed suicide. This made Yi Daofeng and the others feel as if they had punched the air. Some people don't seem to want the profound dragon ritual to be held normally. They are risking their lives to stir up trouble in the Dragon Mist City. I'm afraid that there are many external forces in the Dragon Mist City now. Yi Daofeng had a headache. After he finished reading the files in front of him, he was too lazy to roll them up. His eyebrows were filled with exhaustion. Strange, very strange. For the past few years, the 7 great empires have been itching to take down the Dragon Mist Empire and find the sacred object to hold the profound dragon ritual. Why are they stopping it at such a critical moment? After Yiding finished reading the files, he was also very puzzled. There were some contradictions between the 2 actions. Could it be that it wasn't the people from the 7 great empires who did it? Yiding thought in his heart, but then he shook his head. Although those who were caught were all men of sacrifice, he could tell from the little clues that they weren't people from the Dragon Mist Empire. Could it be that they were forcing them to do something? But why did they withdraw their troops? I don't know what they are up to. Yi Daofeng shook his head. He felt that he was being blinded by a layer of dark clouds. Yiding turned around and opened the door. He received a scroll that was just handed to him. After he opened it and took a look, a smile finally appeared on his cloudy face. He waved the scroll in his hand at Yi Daofeng and said with a smile, "Mr. Yuan, she has already made his move. He has cleaned up the troublemakers in the Dragon Mist City. The whole process took less than an hour. Yes, at least for his kindness, we have to hold the profound dragon ritual well." Yi Daofeng nodded. He seemed to have thought of something and asked, "How's the Tianxin platform?" Hearing this, Yi Ding shook his head and said, "The Tianxin platform was disbanded 4 years ago. Other than to hide from their many enemies, it was probably also to avoid the royal family's investigation. The Tianxin platform disciple who was caught last time also said that he didn't see the emperor of Tianxin and Jun Luo Yi again. Since he couldn't get any useful information out of him, he let him go. Brother Yiding, Brother Daofeng, there is someone outside the palace who wants to see you." At this time, the 5th princess came in and said softly, "At this time? Who is it?" Yi Daofeng and Yi Ding were a little surprised, but they still asked. "The emperor of Tianxin and the group of people we saw in the bronze underground palace." However, the 2 brothers couldn't think of this answer. They were a little confused. They didn't know why the emperor of Tianxin and the others were here at this time. Could it be they should be here to discuss the profound dragon ritual? Yi Ding and Yi Daofeng looked at each other and said this sentence in unison. Then, the 2 brothers rolled their eyes. The 2 brothers pondered for a moment and nodded. They said to the 5th princess, "Go and invite Mr. Yuan Shi, but don't force him." After that, Yi Daofeng sighed. There were still 400,000 soldiers 500 miles away from the Dragon Mist Empire. Most of the royal family's forces were gathered on the city walls. Otherwise, the Dragon Mist City wouldn't be so chaotic. Otherwise, they wouldn't have disturbed Yuan Shi and the others. Yi Ding and the others knew that the 5 of them were in seclusion. However, when they thought of what Yuan Shi had said last time, "I am an army all by myself," at this time, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. This was indeed an army of one man. Damn it, to be able to quell the chaos in the Dragon Mist City in half an hour was not something an ordinary Sky Realm Master could do. "Let's go, big brother. Let's go see this former priest," Yi Ding said with a bitter smile. When Yi Daofeng saw this expression, even he was a little unhappy. However, the moment the 2 of them stepped out of the study, a dignified expression appeared on his face once more. Chapter 491. The dense forest was like a natural barrier, isolating them from all kinds of prying eyes. Hidden in the mountains, Accompanied by the music of the flowing stream, the trees swayed gently. The connected earthen houses and small buildings were separated by a small river, and a short stone bridge connected the two sides together. In front of the small mountain at the side of the small village, a group of energetic young men and women were quietly sitting on the ground and cultivating. A middle-aged man was also looking at these little fellows with gratification. However, although his face was brimming with smiles, there was a trace of worry between his brows. From time to time, he would let out a low sigh as if he had encountered some trouble. "Uncle Feng, you're watching the little fellows cultivate again." Not long after, a clear laughter sounded from the sky. When a middle-aged man heard this slightly familiar voice, he could not help but tremble. A panicked expression flashed through his eyes. Afterwards, he raised his head and saw a white figure descend from the sky and land in front of him. Only then did he smile and say, "Xiao Yuan, why have you come back? I chased someone back here." It's the instigator of all those things that happened in the past 2 years. I finally found that person with great difficulty, so I left behind a trace of my aura and chased after him. The white figure was naturally Yuan Shi. When he was comprehending the formation, he felt that he had reached the saturation point and needed to digest the messy information in his mind. It just so happened that Yi Ding was looking for him, so he conveniently solved the matter in Dragon Mist City. However, when he was in Dragon Mist City, Yuan Shi once again saw that extremely terrifying and bloody scene. Moreover, the blood was very fresh. Clearly, that person had not disappeared for long. In a fit of anger, he did not care about anything else. His soul strength, that was comparable to that of a demi-demon, directly blew up a storm and enveloped the entire Dragon Mist City. Finally, he found the perpetrator. However, when he found that person, he only had time to hastily leave a mark on that person's body. Afterwards, that person disappeared, and he chased this mark all the way here. This was the small village that they had stopped at. It was a rather beautiful, small village hidden in the mountains. You know, Uncle Feng's body trembled, and a hint of panic flashed in his eyes. These two subtle changes did not escape Yuan Shi's eyes, and he immediately frowned. After thinking for a while, his knitted brows relaxed, and then he smiled and said, "Uncle Feng, I'll take a walk in the village. You don't have to come over." When Uncle Feng heard this, his hand trembled slightly. He suddenly stretched out his hand, wanting to grab Yuan Shi. "Uncle Feng, no matter how much someone loves someone, or should I say, everyone has to think that one day they might have to reap a fruit for the cause they sowed. No matter if it's a good or bad fruit, they should bear it." Yuan Shi's soft words caused Uncle Feng's hand, which had yet to touch Yuan Shi, to freeze in midair. Yuan Shi then turned around and smiled gently at him. "Uncle Feng, now I have delivered the child's fruit. You..." When Uncle Feng heard this, his old hand suddenly drooped down. His eyes were a little empty, and his face was a little dejected. It was as if he had aged more than 10 years in an instant. Yuan Shi did not say anything. He only looked at him with a gentle gaze and nodded gently. Uncle Feng let out a long sigh. He knew that he could not hide it anymore. After a long time, he stretched out his trembling hand and patted Yuan Shi's shoulder heavily. He sighed again and said in a low voice, "Little Yi is a good child. It's just that he lost his parents when he was young. I only found out about this 2 days ago." "Uncle Feng, don't worry." Yuan Shi smiled and nodded. He slowly walked towards the small village. As for Uncle Feng, he seemed to be in a daze. His eyes were empty as he looked at the sky. He seemed to have thought of that incident 10 years ago. After passing through one house after another, Yuan Shi came to the end of the village. He sensed the reaction of his imprint. He raised his gaze and looked towards the black house. However, this black house was the result of a fire. The fire had burned down the frame of the house. The beams of the house were on the verge of collapse. It was unknown when it would collapse. Sensing a weak aura of life inside, Yuan Shi took a light breath. He walked to the door of the house and gently pushed it open. What came into view was a dozen or so extremely white skeletons that clashed against the pitch-black background. They were quietly stacked in a corner. Apart from a few that were perfectly preserved, The rest were crudely stacked together. The pitch-black walls were stained with blood of sin. Black spots sputtered from near to far. Other than the solidified blood, there was also some sticky liquid that had not settled down in time. A few corpses were casually placed at the other end of the house. There were many strange symbols drawn on the walls of the house. There were also some circles that were about a foot in size. They looked like the magic circles of the realm of the gods. Yuanshi walked quietly. The sound of blood and white shoes weaved together a soul-calming song. The space here was completely silent. Fortunately, Little Star and the others didn't come here. It's enough for me to see this. Yuanshi sighed softly in his heart. He looked towards the window. Light poured in from the window and shone on a small area on the ground. It was less than a meter in length and width, but it was very clean. In the only place in this small house with light, a small figure was squatting on the ground. His tender little hands were covered in blood. His index finger was still drawing something seriously in that clean area. There was a half-drawn magic circle. At this moment, the boy was seriously drawing the other half. Yuanshi could see that this magic circle had the highest degree of completion. It was much more complete than the ones drawn on the walls. It was transforming from tender to familiar. Yuanshi stood beside the boy. He did not say a word. He just looked at him quietly. The boy was only 13 or 14 years old. His tender little face was full of stubbornness, but he also looked very calm. When he was drawing, he would occasionally use the back of his hand to wipe the sweat off his face. It added some uncoordinated blood stains to his very white face. From beginning to end, the boy did not look at Yuanshi. He only focused on drawing the magic circle in his hand. His eyes were calm, and nothing could be seen. After a long time, the boy finally stopped what he was doing. Yuanshi looked at him with interest, but she didn't see anything special. The boy didn't shout excitedly that he was done, nor did he get excited. It was as if finishing this task was meaningless to him. Finished. In the end, it was Yuanshi who spoke softly. Hearing the voice, the boy turned around and raised his little head. His stubborn eyes quietly looked at Yuanshi. When their eyes met, Yuanshi also looked at him in a daze. Only then did he realize that there was still a metal mask hanging on the boy's stomach. It was the same mask that he had worn to assassinate Xian that night. You kill me? After waiting for 10 minutes, the boy finally spoke. His hoarse voice and dry voice made Yuanshi frown. This child probably had not spoken for a long time. How you are judged has nothing to do with me. I'm just an outsider, Yuanshi said calmly. Then, he took out a robe from his storage ring and casually put it on the boy's face. He also took out a water bag and threw it to the boy. Then, he pointed at the magic circle and said, "Do what?" The boy casually put on the robe. However, this purple robe belonged to Little Ming. Yuanshi did not have any other clothes of a suitable size, so he could only make do with it. After waiting for a long time, the boy stiffly drank a mouthful of water. Then he slowly shook his head and pointed at the two skeletons lying flat in the corner. He said incoherently, "Damn 'em." Then he pointed at a few corpses and piled up skeletons. His eyes flashed with confusion. After a long time, he said, "Bad people." Yuanshi widened her eyes and let out a long sigh. She thought she knew what was going on. But what surprised her was that the little boy was still looking down at the array on the ground and murmuring, "Dad, Mom, I a long-cherished wish." Yuanshi could not help but continue. "So wish." The boy tilted his head and looked at Yuanshi with eyes full of confusion and confusion. "A lifelong wish. The meaning of this picture is that I want you to grow up healthily." Yuanshi did not look sideways. He lied without blushing. The boy opened his mouth, but did not say anything. Then, Yuanshi brought the boy out and buried his parents under a locust tree. Then he used fire and wind elements to completely burn down the dark house. The fire that soared into the sky alarmed everyone in the village. Only Uncle Feng, who was in front of the hill, sighed softly and looked at the young man and woman who were still cultivating in front of him. As for how to deal with the boy, Yuanshi also said that this was not his duty. He was just an outsider. It would be enough to bring him back to the imperial family. As for that tragedy, he did not ask about it. He only left the guess in his heart and did not want to understand it. Before they left, they even threw the little boy into the river for him to take a bath. After washing away the bloodstains on his body, he looked quite cute. But who knew what kind of story had been behind that calm little face and those lifeless eyes? Everything that had happened had been completely destroyed by that fire and a gust of wind. Flying in the sky with Ning Yi, Yuanshi thought that he would scream in fear. However, he only looked down quietly and did not say a word. It was as if his heart had died. Ning Yi hid many things on his body. Among them, there were a few that Yuanshi was more concerned about. It was the Yun family's spiritual talisman that could conceal one's body and aura. There was also a talisman that could increase one's speed. The talisman could be used repeatedly. All these years, Ning Yi had only relied on these things and a small dagger to complete those shocking events. This made Yuanshi lament even more. At the age of 13 or 14, he was still living a carefree childhood in the Yuan family. After returning to Dragon Mist City in a hurry, Yuanshi brought Ning Yi and rushed to the study room. She blasted the door open and saw dozens of dumbfounded faces in the study room. Yiding, why are you here? The mystery dragon ritual hasn't started yet, right? Yuanshi was stunned when he saw the two people who were the most demented. He looked to the two sides and saw the intelligent woman. However, they seemed to be discussing something when Yuanshi rushed in. However, Yuanshi did not care about anything. Since they were not talking, he had something to say. He pulled Ning Yi into the study and pulled him in front of Yiding. This is Mr. Yuan's child? After Yiding went through the initial shock, he still hadn't recovered from his shock. When he saw Yuanshi suddenly pull a child in, his brain went haywire and he blurted out this sentence. Hearing this, Yi Daofeng almost wanted to poke his own eyes out. Yuanshi's face twitched and he laughed bitterly. Fortunately, it wasn't a little star who brought a child in. Otherwise, half of the empire would have been destroyed by your words. Then, he recounted what had just happened in front of everyone. He even took out the talismans and a dagger. Ning Yi did not say a word from the beginning to the end. His eyes were still as empty as ever, as if nothing could attract his attention. You're saying that this child is from these 2 years. Yiding was shocked when he heard this. Although he heard the news from Yuanshi, he still found it hard to believe. The Tianxian emperor and the others who had been standing behind him could not help but sigh. What had this child experienced to be able to walk in a pool of blood at the age of 13 or 14 to end up in such a hellish place? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it either. Yuanshi was not surprised by everyone's surprise. If he had not discovered the little figure in a fit of anger and chased after it, no one would have known. Forever. This child is called Ning Yi. Anyway, I'll leave him to you guys. I just happened to discover him by accident and chased after him for tens of thousands of miles. I brought him back while I was at it. I still have something to do, so I'll talk to you later. If there are no accidents, we'll meet again in 3 days. Yuanshi shrugged. His soft voice made everyone's face black. How could he have chased after him for tens of thousands of miles while he was at it? Don't cause trouble. Little Star isn't as easy to talk to as I am. If this year's profound dragon ritual can't be held, I can't guarantee that something earth-shattering will not happen. Yuanshi then put his hands on his hips and looked at Jun Luoyi and the others unhappily. His casual words made them feel helpless again. Just as they were about to say something, they saw Yuanshi rush out like a gust of wind. He did not even leave a shadow behind, leaving behind a room full of messy emotions. At this time, the little boy in purple slowly turned his head and looked in the direction where Yuanshi disappeared. His empty eyes flashed with a trace of color. Chapter 492. On the Black Earth, streaks of sword chi swept across the wilderness. The terrifying power ravaged the earth over and over again. However, in less than half a minute, the Black Earth would return to its original state. Mournful roars and screams of beasts resounded through the wilderness. The monstrous demonic chi combined together, causing even the space to tremble. In the endless army of black beasts, there was only a very small figure. He wielded 2 huge swords and killed all the black beasts that came within 5 meters of him. The figure was only strolling on the ground, step by step. He did not seem to be in a hurry as he walked forward. It was as if he could not see the ferocious black beasts that covered the mountains. He just swung his sword again and again. There were also a dozen vague purple shadows on his body. Every time he swung his huge sword, the shadows would send out sword chi to his left, right, and back. If the figure chose to attack with a fist or a palm, the shadows would also attack with a palm, a fist, or a sword. Suddenly, an extremely huge black beast appeared on the path in front of the figure. Terrifying demonic chi rolled over. The body of the black beast was hundreds of feet long. Its blood-red eyes were even bigger than a person's. The huge black beast stretched out its thick limbs and stared at the figure with its berserk eyes. Then it suddenly raised one of its palms and slapped at the figure like a mountain. When the black beast raised its palms, the black beasts around it also went berserk. Roars sounded one after another as they all pounced at the figure in a frenzy. The faint purplish gold eyes looked up and glanced at the black beasts that were several thousand feet tall. Then he looked at the black beasts that were pouncing from all directions and blocking the way. The human figure sighed and slowly squatted down. He crossed his 2 giant swords and sheathed them at his waist. The faint purplish gold shadows also followed his movements and squatted down. Sword shadow, flowing light. With a low roar, the figure suddenly pulled out his 2 swords and slashed forward. The shadows also slashed out dozens of times. The dazzling sword chi was so fast that even the shadows could not be seen. It swept out like light, drawing dozens of circular sword chi in the void. After the 2 swords were swung, the world instantly quieted down. It was dead silent. However, the figure did not find it strange at all. He continued to walk forward and did not even look at those black beasts. Even those huge black beasts did not pay attention to him. A cold wind blew past, and the black beasts that covered the mountains and plains instantly disappeared. Looking back at the black beasts that were constantly disintegrating in the air, the figure sighed. Without the black beasts, he did not seem so small anymore. The sword technique in the Linghong sword is also exceptionally powerful. I originally thought that only the Linghong sword could produce flowing light. I did not expect that I could also produce sword chi that is faster than the speed of light with the Netherworld Ruins sword. Yin Nuoxing sighed. He did not know how much time had passed since he jumped down from the dead tree. The black beasts that appeared had also changed from the original strength of the Immortal 5 to the Devil rank. Until just now, the strength of those black beasts was probably already at the Devil rank 6 seal. That huge black beast was even a powerful existence of the demigod rank. The crystal of the 6 paths of reincarnation beside him was still following him. The energy in his body was still limitless. However, this endless slaughter made even Yun Nuoxing's expression a little ugly. Although he was using these black beasts to temper his body, this was more like torture. It made him feel mentally exhausted. However, he had no choice but to kill all the way. I can control the 10,000 transformation sword body now. Looking at the light purple shadow that was attached to his body like a shadow, Yun Nuoxing felt a little relieved. The 10,000 transformation sword body could only stand in one place and quickly and mindlessly produce sword chi one after another. Now, he could control them and make them move with his body. When he swung his sword, the shadow would follow. It was as if he had swung his sword dozens of times at once. Dong! At the end of the horizon, a black fog gradually rose up. It was as if a tall mountain was slowly rising. 2 red moons appeared in the sky, emitting an ominous aura. At the same time, an extremely terrifying pressure descended from the sky, causing the earth and space to tremble. It was as if they would collapse at any time. However, the pressure suddenly disappeared when it reached Yun Nuoxing. How could he, who had many divine weapons and even divine weapons, be suppressed by the pressure? The aura of a high-level god. Is this the last test? Yun Nuoxing watched the black shadow slowly stand up. The 2 red moons stared at him. Finally, Yin Nuoxing saw a huge figure that was at least 1,000,000 feet tall. It was as if it was standing above the Milky Way and could pluck the stars with one hand. Wow, what a big guy! Even though he was mentally prepared, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help sweating. This thing was too big. I can try that. However, although he was surprised, Yin Nuoxing's speed was not slow at all. Before the big guy started to move, he moved first. Surging light elements gushed out of his body continuously. It was as if his body was about to turn into a star. The dazzling light even illuminated the huge black beast's figure. The darkness was gradually dispelled. Roar! The huge black beast suddenly opened its mouth. With a roar, it shook the space and created pitch-black cracks. Even Yin Nuoxing's light elements were offset by this roar. Feeling that the density of the light elements had decreased, Yin Nuoxing's eyebrows trembled slightly. Then he grinned. Rays of light gradually appeared around his body. They were weapons. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, and tridents. Golden chains wrapped around Yin Nuoxing's body. Then his body suddenly trembled. His whole body was like a long golden arrow. He dived towards the huge black beast together with dozens of divine weapons. The two red moons shrank slightly. It seemed that they didn't expect Yin Nuoxing to be so fast. However, the black beast didn't seem to be in a hurry. Its huge legs stomped hard. Rings of light flashed out from under its feet and densely covered the ground. Then they suddenly solidified. An invisible force was quietly born. Seeing that the rings of light were forming a magic array, Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. However, he didn't care too much. The light elements that were condensed to the extreme brought him to the front of the huge black beast in a flash. The halberd in his right hand fiercely pierced into the huge black beast's leg. A thick black fog splashed out. However, before the fog could touch him, the light elements brought him to another place in a flash. Buzz! The figure that just appeared froze slightly. Before he could insert the second divine weapon into the huge black beast's body, a terrifying force suddenly descended on Yin Nuoxing's body, causing his figure to freeze for a moment. It was also at this moment that the huge fist of the huge black beast, which was comparable to a mountain range, came crashing down from the sky. In a few blinks of an eye, it rushed in front of Yin Nuoxing. However, when the huge fist swept over, it only swept a patch of light particles. A few thousand meters in front of the huge black beast, a cluster of light particles slowly appeared. After that, they gathered and Yin Nuoxing's figure appeared. However, his appearance seemed a little different at this time. His light purple hair had turned into a brilliant gold. Even his purplish gold eyes were filled with gold. Dense light particles spiraled around his body. Every time his 6 golden wings flapped, a wave of particle turbulence would be stirred up. Phew! I was almost hit. Yin Nuoxing wiped his sweat. If it wasn't for the unlimited energy that allowed him to condense the most brilliant light elements, the moment the solidification was removed, he might really have been hit by that punch. Buzz! Planet Yanua had just stopped when the densely packed rings of light below suddenly changed. This made his pupils shrink slightly. It was very similar to the type of spirit design that he had seen before, the one he had seen in Yuyan City, the divine restriction spirit design. Just as the changing array solidified, Yin Nuoxing felt a great pressure descend from the sky. It directly pressed down on his body that was suspended in the air. This is gravity. Just as Yin Nuoxing's feet touched the ground, the black ground around him suddenly caved in and turned into a huge pit. The place where Yin Nuoxing's feet landed sank even deeper. Under such great pressure, even if he had movement mystic skills, he couldn't use them. Those divine weapons also boomed continuously to resist the terrifying gravity array. His evil spirit eye opened in response. However, Yin Nuoxing only took a glance before he hurriedly closed it. This divine restriction array was much more complete than the one in Yuyan City. If he forcefully used his evil spirit eye to look at it, it might even backfire on him. Light elements. Even light can be suppressed by gravity? Yin Nuoxing gritted his teeth. The light particles on his body became denser. The two huge swords in his hands also boomed as he tried to break free from his pressure. An ear-piercing sound of breaking wind exploded in the air as a huge black fist smashed towards Yin Nuoxing like a meteor, crashing into the earth. Wherever the fist passed, even the void was torn apart. That terrifying power had yet to reach Yin Nuoxing, but the oppressive feeling had already descended upon him. He only had time to cross his two swords in front of him, and the power of the stars in his body began to go berserk. Boom! An unparalleled force crashed onto the huge swords. It traveled through his arm and spread to his entire body. Yin Nuoxing felt as though his entire body was about to fall apart. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His body was fiercely hit by this heavy fist, and he was pushed back tens of thousands of feet. Two cracks appeared on the ground from his feet. Soul-burning technique, burn! Yin Nuoxing roared. He once again used the soul-burning technique that he hadn't used in a long time. Streaks of scarlet runes appeared from his body and climbed to every corner of his body. Since the energy is unlimited, 16 times amplification, Yin Nuoxing's body seemed as though it was going to burn. Rolling black flames broke out from his body. The golden light elements seemed to have turned into fire elements at this moment and burned Yin Nuoxing's body. Scarlet radiance flickered from his body. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing looked like a demon. With an angry roar, he used all his strength with both hands. Accompanied by a series of explosive sounds, he forcefully pushed back the meteorite-like fist. The silver-blue Ling Hong sword also appeared at the same time. Then, Yin Nuoxing grabbed it tightly and slammed it into the Netherworld Ruins sword. His golden eyes revealed a bewitching scarlet color, as though two balls of fire were about to rush out. Boom! A piece of land beside him was smashed into smithereens by a giant black fist. Yin Nuoxing's figure flashed, and before he could get far, that huge gravitational force descended once again, and this time, the gravitational force was several times stronger than before. 10,000 times the gravity? Then, soul-burning technique, 64 times amplification. Crimson runes covered his entire body, and even half of his long golden hair had turned crimson. Yin Nuoxing opened his mouth and let out an earth-shattering roar. This roar no longer sounded like the voice of a human, but more like the roar of a beast. And this roar directly shattered the gravitational pressure on his body, causing several layers of the ground to collapse. His body was like a beam of light that shot straight towards the great beast's body. If it was under normal circumstances, Yin Nuoxing definitely wouldn't dare to try this. Increasing the soul power consumption rate of the soul-burning technique by 64 times at the cost of burning soul power was simply suicide. However, it was different here. There was unlimited energy here. The Netherworld Ruins sword and Ling Hong sword quickly merged. Yin Nuoxing didn't even look at it. He took out a 10-meter-long golden sword and slashed at the space in front of him with all his might. When the sword fell, a huge fist the size of a star appeared with a loud bang. When the two collided, there was a loud sound of metal colliding. The terrifying force sent Yin Nuoxing flying. Bright light, floating golden shadow. Yin Nuoxing roared, and thousands of his silhouettes suddenly appeared in the void. Then, all of them rushed towards the giant beast. Dozens of silhouettes even grabbed his divine weapon and rushed towards the giant beast like rays of light. These weren't afterimages, but his clones. All of them were condensed from rich light elements and had 100% of the power of the original body. Roar! The giant beast roared fiercely. The sound waves turned into a substantial energy impact that covered all of Yin Nuoxing's figures. The latter and the others all roared at the sky. Thousands of roars stacked on top of each other and blasted toward the former's sound waves, shattering the space into nothingness. Chi! Chi! The sound of sharp swords piercing through flesh resounded in the void. Yin Nuoxing's figures held his 18 artifacts and stabbed them all into the giant beast's body. There were also tens of thousands of long swords condensed from energy that pierced into the giant beast's body. The giant beast suddenly opened its mouth wide, as if it wanted to devour the world. Endless dark energy condensed into its mouth. All the energy in the world was completely absorbed and slowly condensed in its mouth. Nine Heavens' soul-concealing formation, seal. Yin Nuoxing's thousands of figures rapidly formed hand seals. Their roars resounded in the sky. Then, the weapons that pierced into the giant beast's body flickered with a pitch-black light. They actually extracted the giant beast's energy. Then, they turned into energy runes and wrapped around the giant beast's body from the bottom to the top. Roar. However, just as the energy seal was about to reach its body, the giant beast roared fiercely. The condensed, endless energy suddenly flashed, and the world seemed to darken. In the dark world, all the colors had turned completely black. There was only a giant black figure and thousands of golden figures. The endless energy turned into an eternal energy beam that shot toward the person at the back of the golden figures. Along the way, the void collapsed. Even the dark yellow time barrier was on the verge of collapse. You recognize me? Yin Nuoxing's pupils shrank. He held the divine sword that was formed by the fusion of two divine artifacts. The blood in his body roared. The power of the stars and the elemental energy boiled and poured into the divine sword like waves. The scarlet runes also spread along with the energy. When he activated all his power, the six wings slowly grew from 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet. Golden particles appeared in the sky, and all of them surged toward Yin Nuoxing. Su Ming, the energy pillar that represented eternity, flashed to 100 feet in front of Yin Nuoxing in a few breaths of time. The energy that seemed to be able to destroy time and space caused Yin Nuoxing's expression to become solemn. The latter also suddenly raised the divine sword, took a deep breath, and suddenly spat out a loud shout as the divine sword slashed down. Final slash. Nine Heavens' spirit-subduing formation, annihilation. And when Yin Nuoxing's true body swung down the divine sword that symbolized destruction, the thousands of golden figures also started to form hand seals. The formation that had opened up within the huge beast's body started to collapse. A terrifying energy hurricane swept out, and there were even bolts of chaotic energy that turned into lightning that wreaked havoc within the beast's body. Break. A wild roar suddenly sounded. Suddenly, a huge black sword light that was hundreds of thousands of feet long burst out from the divine sword with a terrifying force that could destroy the world. The moment the sword light shot out, it was as if a bomb had been thrown into the void. The tottering barrier of time suddenly began to fluctuate, and purple cracks began to appear all over it. After the black earth that was already in ruins, it sank down by several hundred meters, and a 100,000-foot wide crack began to rapidly spread out. Chapter 493. On the tattered black land, cracks that were tens of thousands of feet wide extended as far as the eye could see. What was even more shocking was that there was a huge fan-shaped crack that was 1,000,000 miles wide, as well as a bottomless pit of unknown size and width. The chaotic power of the void space was roaring nonstop here. The shattered void space slowly shrank, and the time barrier that was exposed also hid itself. Space was slowly healing, but the black land seemed to be unable to heal itself. It was left lying there in a tattered state. The huge crack that was 1,000,000 miles wide was even expanding. The rocks and ground that were being eroded by the two types of flames and were slowly melting. At the front of the crack, there was a golden and scarlet figure kneeling on the ground weakly. His expression was a little dull. Although there was an endless amount of energy in this place, the after effects of overdrawing his power did not let him go. Even though the power of stars and mental strength in his body were full, he did not even want to raise his arm. He had overdrawn his strength by 64 times, which meant that every cell in his body had 64 times the normal function. This expansion and contraction almost caused his powerful body to be unable to withstand it. The six-color crystal was still spinning on the spot. When it saw Yun Nuoxing sitting there with empty eyes, it emitted a ball of light that enveloped Yun Nuoxing. It turned into a bubble and lifted Yun Nuoxing in the air. Then, the crystal pulled Yun Nuoxing towards the front of the land. They stared blankly at the crack that was 1,000,000 feet long, slowly extending. In the end, it was even 100 million miles wide. At the end of the crack, a bottomless pit appeared in front of them. Above the pit, there was a ball of light floating. When the crystal pulled Yun Nuoxing past the pit, the ball of light also floated over. Then, it passed through the bubble and landed in front of Yun Nuoxing, staring blankly at the ball of light. Yun Nuoxing did not seem to have recovered. His expression was a little dull, but he instinctively stretched out his hand. The ball of light landed on his hand gently. With a soft sound, it burst like a bubble. A colorful bracelet appeared and landed in his hand. Yun Nuoxing stared blankly at the bracelet, but he did not react at all. His eyelids drooped slightly, and he turned his gaze to look at the crack. Only a ball of paste was left in his mind. The crystal pulled Yun Nuoxing and flew away. After a long time, when they had left the battlefield, the scene in front of them suddenly changed. They had reached the end of the Black Land, and there was a green grassland in front of them. The rich vitality here was completely different from the deathly aura here. Just as the crystal pulled Yun Nuoxing to the grassland, a loud rumble came from the Black Land behind them. Then they saw that the deathly Black Land suddenly sank into the ground and gradually broke into pieces. Finally, it disappeared. The sky also turned from dark to blue. White clouds of various shapes floated in the sky and did not move. It seemed a little lazy. After the Black Land disappeared, the green grassland began to spread and replaced the empty scene. At first glance, it seemed that Yun Nuoxing had just come from the grassland. The crystal carried him and flew until they arrived in front of a lake. There was a towering ancient tree there. Its entire body was flowing with a dark green light. It was 100,000 feet tall, and it seemed to be holding up the sky. On the other side of the lake, there was a thatched cottage. The crystal carried Yun Nuoxing to the thatched cottage and placed him on a bed. Then, there was no more movement. Yun Nuoxing's lifeless eyes, which had been open all this time, slowly closed. This sleep was quite comfortable. He heard the chirping of birds and the light music of tree leaves. The lake water flowed past with a pleasant tinkling sound, like the sound of wind chimes swaying in the wind. In this sleep, Yun Nuoxing dreamed of many places and many people. There was Yuan, Xianin, Ming, Yishi, and Yuanxi's family. They were as interesting as when he first met them. He also saw Yao Hua and the others, Qin Yu and Uncle Qin, and some people he had never met before. He felt that they were very familiar, but he couldn't remember who they were. In a dream, there was also Xian. He and Xian held hands and toured the mountains. They went to some places they had never been to before. They leaned against each other on the grassland. It was very realistic. The sound of the wind, the smell of the soil, the scorching heat of the sun, everything was so real that it couldn't be any more real. It made him realize for the first time that dreams could be so beautiful. Many years later, in a certain hall, Yun Nuoxing was holding the hand of a beautiful woman in a white dress. Her dark purple hair was as smooth and lustrous as silk, hanging down naturally. He was still wearing a black trench coat, which had never changed. The black and white contrasted against each other. Under the sunlight, they were incomparably sacred. The two of them were like a celestial couple, which made people envious. At the surrounding tables, there were people who knew each other. Those familiar faces were all smiling with blessings. Yao Hua and the others were so excited that they whistled. Everyone was so excited that they were shouting and cheering. This should have been a very happy scene, but Yun Nuoxing was a little confused. Although his handsome face was filled with joy, it didn't seem to be a smile from the heart. He was at a loss, and at a loss. He turned his head and looked at Ziyan's flawless face. Compared to his memory of her, she had a more sacred charm. Her beauty was unparalleled. She smiled sweetly at him like a fairy. Happy? Excited? These feelings weren't related to yin nuashing. He only felt very confused. Everything seemed to be natural, and everything seemed to be logical. Everything seemed to be inexplicable. He didn't understand. He kept feeling that there was a hole in his heart. It shouldn't be like this. Finally, they walked to the front of the ceremonial stage and stood facing each other. Xian had a bright smile on her face, but Yin Nuashing's smile was very stiff. There was a hint of repulsion in their eyes that wanted to burst out. "Are you not happy?" Xian chuckled. "Happy?" The smile on Yin Nuashing's face completely stiffened. Was he happy? He didn't seem to be, but he felt very happy. It shouldn't be like this. Yes, everything was far from going so smoothly. Everything shouldn't be so logical. Of course I'm happy to be able to marry the fairy of my dreams, but Yin Nuashing finally smiled from the bottom of his heart. His smile was very bright. He understood. He knew what the repulsion that had existed in his heart for a long time was. Xian tilted her head. She was still smiling very brightly and peacefully. Her lily-white hand held his hand tightly and didn't let go. "It's just that I don't have such qualifications. I don't have such rights. I lost everything. I lost all my memories. I didn't give myself such rights. I can let go of a lot of things. I can even abandon my memories. No matter what happened in the past, no matter who I used to be, my memories are looking for me. They're calling me. They want to wake me up." Yin Nuashing chuckled softly. His grip on Xian's hand tightened slightly. "Maybe I've imagined this day in the depths of my heart. Maybe I've been looking forward to this day. Maybe, there are many maybe, but at least it's not now. It can't be now." Xian still chuckled and nodded. Mei Mao was still smiling. "Don't you hate me?" Yin Nuashing laughed self-deprecatingly. I don't hate you. How can I hate you?" Xian shook his head and gave him the most beautiful smile. In an instant, it overshadowed all the brilliance in the world. It was dazzling, intoxicating, and mesmerizing. "I'm sorry." Yin Nuashing lowered his eyes and murmured softly. He felt a little guilty in his heart. Xian shook her head and didn't say anything. She covered her chest with one hand and pressed her other hand on Yin Nuashing's chest. Her cherry lips moved slightly as if she was saying something silently. Then, Yin Nuashing felt everything freeze. His tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. What he saw was a small house made of wood and bamboo. Warm sunlight poured in through the door and windows. Everything started from a dream and ended in reality. I wasn't allowed to have those beautiful things. Even the most brilliant moment of my life was forbidden to me. Thank you for letting me see that scene," Yin Nuashing said softly as if she was talking to herself. That should be the strongest desire in the depths of your heart. Although there might be some problems with the way you expressed it, it was still the peace that you wanted the most in your heart. Why did you reject it in the end? This time, the six-colored crystal didn't remain silent. Its voice was very calm. This was the clear and melodious voice of a young woman. It had a special rhythm that made people want to fall asleep when they heard it. "Because I don't have a right to have those things. A blank life and blank memories. But a life that once belonged to me and a memory that once belonged to me was forcefully stuffed in. Who am I? I don't know. Before I completely decide on this definition, I don't have the right to judge my life," Yin Nuashing said with a faint smile. It was as if she was talking to the crystal, but also to herself. The six-colored crystal fell silent. This answer was rather strange, but to Yin Nuashing, it was a pertinent answer. "Congratulations, you have perfectly passed the second trial. Dream thoughts," the six-colored crystal said indifferently. However, this was the highest evaluation it had ever given. Since ancient times, there were only 7 people who had cultivated the 6 paths of reincarnation technique, excluding the founder. Yin Nuashing was the 9th. Every one of them had been tested by it. As for the second trial's dream thoughts, no one had passed it except for Yin Nuashing. Dream thoughts would show the deepest desire and hope in the person's heart. It was the highest realm of peace and happiness. These 7 people couldn't break free from it, even if they knew that it was a dream. "What will happen if I fail?" Yin Nuashing asked. "Nothing will happen. The first 2 trials are a kind of training. If you pass it, it means that the training has been perfect and there will be a reward. If you don't pass, there will be more training, the six-colored crystal said. What reward? Yin Nuoxing's eyes lit up slightly. Then, she came to her senses. She seemed to be holding something in her hand. She quickly lowered her head to look at her palm. There was a colorful bracelet lying there. This is... Yin Nuoxing looked at the bracelet in surprise. This is the extra reward for the first trial. Battle. By the way, the last giant beast was at the level of a god emperor. This was also determined by the energy you released before. The six-colored crystal said indifferently. This is why you gave me a god emperor giant beast? Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt a little speechless. He thought that the giant beast was at the peak of the underworld emperor level. He didn't expect it to be at the level of a god emperor. Did he bring this upon himself? Other than the person who created this Heart Sutra, the other 7 people all went through the trial. However, the strongest summoned beast at the last stage of the first trial was the one you summoned. At that time, there was a god emperor powerhouse who only summoned a beast of equal strength to him. The six-colored crystal seemed to be mocking him. Actually, it's the same. There's no punishment even if you don't pass. Fine. I brought this upon myself, but at least I passed. So what's the reward? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and asked in annoyance. The reward for the first trial is 2 formations. One of them is the Black Prisoner Beast. It's a summoning formation. It's around the 8th stage of the divine rank. The other one is the Gravity Formation that you've forcefully shattered. It's only at the level of a divine rank heaven restriction. Moreover, you have to figure out how to activate the heaven restriction yourself. Before you activated it, it was only a 5th stage divine rank formation. Of course, it can be upgraded to a divine rank heaven restriction. This depends on your luck, the six-colored crystal said indifferently. That bracelet is the soul stabilizing bracelet. It's the extra reward for the first trial. It's a token of the stars in the starry sky. You'll know what it means in the future. As for its original use, it's to tie up hair. Huh? Yin Nuoxing almost rolled off the bed. Tie up hair? I'm kidding. The six-colored crystal couldn't help but laugh. It let out a string of tinkling sounds like silver bells. The soul stabilizing bracelet can store energy. It's similar to a backup energy source. When you wear it, it can automatically absorb the energy that overflows from your body. This includes spiritual power and soul power. When you cultivate, it can also extract 1% of the energy and automatically store it. When the energy in your body is used up, it will turn into pure energy and return to you. If you take off the soul stabilizing bracelet and crush it, the stored energy will explode out in one go. However, when the soul stabilizing bracelet is crushed, it will follow the energy and enter your body. When it's repaired, it will come out again. That's right. The soul stabilizing bracelet is really used to tie up hair. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. Who came up with the idea of tying up hair? As for the rest, you have to figure it out yourself. The six-colored crystal smiled faintly. Then it said, as for the reward for the second trial, it's a divine rank. Stop. Let's discuss. Can we change it? Yin Nuoxing's face couldn't help but twitch. The art of burning soul could fuse other mystic arts and mental cultivation techniques. He had already cultivated the art of flame, demon burning heaven, the art of receiving spirit, and the glazed treasure mirror. Although the art of 6 paths of reincarnation was a mental cultivation technique related to the cultivation of the mind and soul, it was also fused together. For mystic arts and mental cultivation techniques, and one mental cultivation technique, was there any need to cultivate in the future? No. The six-colored crystal said faintly. All right, if you can't change it, then you can't change it. What Xian art is that? Let me guess. Is it related to dreams? Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing's handsome face immediately turned into a crying face. He couldn't help but mutter. All right, 5 Xian art hard arts. In the future, his cultivation speed would probably be slower than a snail's crawl. In the 1,000 dream hard arts, it's different from ordinary hard arts related to dreams. The 1,000 dream heart arts can create a dream world. The six-colored crystal said softly. Chapter 494. Dream World. At the mention of the word world, Yin Nuoxing's heart was in turmoil. He knew that in this world, there were many different subworlds, which were worlds similar to parallel worlds. Of course, the difference between a parallel world and a parallel world was that a parallel world was a replica of the original world, while a subworld was different from the original world. The source world is the world you live in. This is also the basic world, also known as the origin world. Below it, there are many different secondary worlds. The boundary world is a mirror world created by a boundary. It can show the boundary that exists in the source world. If you want to escape into the boundary world, you need to be a formation grandmaster with very high attainments in formations. The boundary world is also a mirror world created by a boundary. Only its creator can enter that world. For ordinary boundary worlds, the door is a boundary array. Individual boundaries are the key to open the door to the boundary world. It's very difficult to cultivate. The dream world, of course, the definition of this world is very vague. This secondary world can only be entered in a dream. Moreover, it needs to be guided through a special method. The dream world is not necessarily the same as the source world. There may be a big difference. There are similar worlds, such as the mirror world, the elemental world, the spiritual world, and so on. Some worlds have many people who abide by the rules of the secondary world to survive. Of course, some worlds have no life or very little life, such as the boundary world. The six-colored crystal spoke with assurance. Yin Nuoxing held his forehead and felt that his head was trembling. This world has been ruined. How are the secondary worlds born? Yin Nuoxing asked. Most of them are created by humans. The creator is in existence in the rebirth state. The six-colored crystal said. Well, this answer was already known in his heart. People at this level could not be looked at with conventional eyes. Yin Nuoxing's head hurt again. He could not help but sigh and asked again, there are so many secondary worlds. Has anyone created the source world? No, or to be exact, no one, not even the gods, can create the source world. At most, they can create a secondary world using the blueprint of the source world. In the end, even if it looks very similar to the source world, no matter how perfect it is just a small world. No one, no god can create the source world. Even the parallel worlds are just a type of mirror world. They exist naturally and look very similar to the source world. The source world is the foundation of all secondary worlds. How can it be replicated? The six-colored crystal said with an unquestionable voice. Yin Nuoxing's mind was filled with stars. He could even see a few stars spinning in front of him. He always felt that they would smash him in the next second. What was this and what? Don't say any more. Let's go back, go back. I'm going to faint. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly reached out and stopped the six-colored crystal from continuing. He felt that if he did not speak, the six-colored crystal would talk to itself for a whole day. Oh. The six-colored crystal responded and then said, the 1,000 Dream Sutra can create dream worlds. These dream worlds will be stored in your dreams. Of course, they can also be erased. The effects of these dream worlds are up to you to experience. The type of dream world depends on the type of world you want to create. Of course, these dream worlds that you create are not secondary worlds and have nothing to do with that dream world. Only this small world that you create is perfect enough and different from the source world can be called a secondary world. However, the difference here does not refer to the difference in appearance, but to the difference in rules. All right, I'm begging you, don't say any more. Yin Nuoxing covered his face. If this continued, he might die here. The six-colored crystal snorted and said arrogantly, young man, listen to more of other people's knowledge. Now, it's equivalent to you knowing about the divine rank in advance. Moreover, many gods don't even know about these things regarding the world. Even if they know, how can they know more than me? I know. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He knew that this knowledge was very precious, but telling him so much at once was like throwing a pile of stones into the river. Moreover, these stones were incomparably huge. If it was just a small stone, it might splash a ripple and disappear, but a pile of large stones would make the river incomparably chaotic. If you know. The six-colored crystal sighed and threw down a few things. Then it said, "Then hurry up and cultivate. Once you're done, I'll let you out." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing was startled. He seemed to have forgotten the time. "How long has it been since I came in? If we count what your consciousness has experienced, including the dreams, it should be around 10 years. Puffed. Yin Nuoxing spat out a mouthful of water. "Don't worry. If we don't count the dreams, it's been half a year. You killed for half a year in the first test." Then, Yin Nuoxing wanted to say something. But those are only what your spirit and soul are experiencing. The six-colored crystal interrupted him and continued. 6 paths of reincarnation. 6 paths of reincarnation. You're currently experiencing reincarnation, which is different from your physical body's time. If you want to count, it's been 2 days. Phew. Yin Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, only 2 days had passed. Then, the mystery dragon ritual would begin in 3 days. At least he didn't miss it. Seriously, among those who cultivate the 6 paths of reincarnation, you're the weakest. You can't even tell such a small thing. The six-colored crystal couldn't help but look down on him. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. "I'm the weakest? Then, who's the weakest after me?" Yin Nuoxing asked unhappily. No matter what, he had defeated an Emperor God level-summoned beast. How could he be the weakest? "The weakest after you is just a Shunming. By the way, let me tell you, the strongest is an Emperor God level master," the six-colored crystal said calmly. This made Yin Nuoxing smile even more bitterly. It seemed like he had learned it too early. He might have broken the bottom line. "Oh right, the reincarnation disc's engraving. Someone told me that it's a key. How do I use it?" Yin Nuoxing asked again, recalling what Xian Yin had told him before. The reincarnation disc's engraving. You can only use it after you've experienced all the trials. Now is not the time. There are a total of 9 tests. I'll tell you about them while I'm at it. Battle, dream, element, perception, cultivation, willpower, spirit, soul, unknown. Huh? Unknown. What the hell is unknown? What the hell is unknown? Yin Nuoxing was dumbfounded. What was the meaning of the unknown? Because no one has gone there. If you don't complete all the trials, the final trial won't open. The engraving is also useless. It's useless. The six-colored crystal sighed. Caressing the 3 scrolls that the six-colored crystal threw down, Yin Nuoxing was silent. After a long time, he asked, "How many of the 9 trials did you pass the most? Other than the first 2 trials, which didn't have any effect, you can only continue to the next trial after passing one." The one who went the furthest was the Emperor God level master. After going through the trial of willpower, he went crazy. The six-colored crystal said ruthlessly, "You have to be mentally prepared for what will happen in the trials here." Crazy. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Even the Emperor God level master could only go to the 6th trial. How could his willpower be weak when his cultivation reached the Emperor God level? But he was still crazy. He really didn't know what terrifying things would test him there. Sighing, Yin Nuoxing didn't ask any more questions. He threw away all the distracting thoughts and took a few deep breaths. When his mind calmed down, he pressed the 1,000 Dream Heart Sutra scroll on his forehead. His mind was completely immersed in it. What he didn't see was that when the 1,000 Dream Heart Sutra was pressed on his forehead, the six-colored crystal suddenly trembled. A bright light burst out from it, illuminating the vast grassland. In the distance, hundreds of light pillars shot up into the sky. The blue sky suddenly turned into a dazzling color. The different shapes of the clouds changed in an instant. Even the ground trembled slightly. It seemed like an earthquake was about to happen. Seeing such a huge phenomenon, the six-colored crystal let out a cold gasp. The 1,000 Dream Heart Sutra and the 6-Path Reincarnation Sutra were 2 heart sutras that existed side by side. When learning the 1,000 Dream Heart Sutra, The person who cultivated the six-path reincarnation sutra would be tested to see if they were suitable to cultivate these two heart sutras. And from the looks of it, this heart sutra didn't seem to be suitable for Yun Noashing, his samsara disc. The six-colored crystal suddenly turned a circle. At this moment, a black light lit up on Yun Noashing's forehead. Even without the reincarnation mirror, he could clearly see the samsara disc in his soul. That deep, dark samsara disc. If he zoomed in, he would see black engravings densely engraved on it. This made the six-colored crystal let out a cold gasp. No wonder someone told him that the engravings on the samsara disc could be used as a key. This person has been reincarnated for at least 10,000 lifetimes. In the past, even the reincarnation emperor didn't reincarnate as many times as him. The entire samsara disc is black. The six-colored crystal murmured in shock. It seemed to have frightened itself quite a bit. I'm really curious about who this person is. If he has been reincarnated for more than 10,000 lifetimes, he must be at least a powerful person from the ancient times. Maybe he is even a god from the ancient times. The six-colored crystal let out a sigh. However, the six-colored crystal didn't do anything. Just as it was about to float to the door, it saw a burst of white light on Yun Noashing's body. This made it stunned for a moment. It quickly turned its gaze and saw between Yun Noashing's eyebrows. There was a silver-white mark that was slowly shining with a dazzling light. This time, it directly made a sound like it had spat out water. The mark of a god. Good Lord, he has a god protecting him. He is one of the destined ones in the big world, and he is also one of the reincarnators in all the lifetimes. This time, the six-colored crystal was truly frightened. The chosen one only existed in the great world, and they were a very special group of people. There is no need to describe them in other words. Only one sentence was enough. Their guardian was a god. Is it the big world again? How many years has it been in the outside world? The karmic reincarnation has been going up and down for tens of thousands of years. The needle of time has turned round and round, and the world has been reincarnated again and again. Those reincarnations that have not passed away, where are they now? The netherworld is the home of the gods, and reincarnation is the journey of all souls. Where should we go in this life? Chapter 495. In the imperial palace of Longlan, Yun Noashing and the others were staying at. After Yun Noashing fell into a deep sleep after cultivating the 6 paths of reincarnation technique, no one dared to approach the person on the sofa. Yi Shi and the others were still working hard in the secret room. Without the evil spirit eye, it was very difficult for the 4 of them to fuse talismans, arrays, and charms together. Fortunately, Xian and Yun Nuashing had gone to the Yun family. Moreover, her comprehension was actually very good. In a short 2 days, she had comprehended 8 and even 9 talismans. Now, it was her turn to teach Yi Shi and the others. As for Yi Shi, after listening for 10 minutes, she completely understood. She had studied charms before and knew some very important things. Charms and talismans were somewhat similar. Since that was the case, she only needed to know the differences between the two to be able to link them together. Therefore, after she understood, she threw herself into Yun Nuashing's career. Since she didn't have the evil spirit eye's ability to see through everything, she would try it one by one. She would convert the talismans into energy lines, convert arrays into energy lines, and then randomly mix them together. Thus, it exploded. Boom! Hearing the violent explosion coming from the secret room, Xian, Yuan Shi, and Qin Yin all shrunk their necks. Ever since Yuan Shi returned, he could hear extremely violent explosions coming from the secret room from time to time. Although every time he rushed in, Yishi was completely fine. However, the walls were always blasted with large and small holes. However, later on, they got used to it. They were used to drinking tea calmly and chatting calmly amidst the explosions, so much so that they couldn't cultivate calmly. They could only bitterly smile and pray that Yin Nuashing would wake up soon. Otherwise, Yishi would probably blow up the palace. Under Xian's patient guidance, Yuan Shi and Qin Yin spent 2 days to thoroughly understand the talismans. This was not difficult for them. The key was to understand how to convert mystic skills and other things into energy lines. Once they understood, it would be easy. I feel that if I go take the immortal ranked array formation master examination now, I'll definitely pass. Yuanshi took a sip of tea and smiled confidently. At that time, I can find Little Star to be my sparring partner. Yuanshi, don't blame me for not reminding you. Little Star has learned quite a few divine-level formations, Xian teased. When the time comes, I'm afraid it won't be about who wants to be a sparring partner, but let's guess how many days young Master Yuan will be bettered in. Qinyan couldn't help but laugh. Although she was a little confident that she could take the Array Master examination, she felt that she didn't have much talent in Array Masters. Therefore, she didn't plan to delve too deeply into it. However, after learning how to convert mystic skills and mystic arts into energy patterns, she felt that this trip wasn't in vain. This would be of great help to her future mystic skills. Tomorrow is the Mystery Dragon ritual, and Little Star still hasn't woken up. Is there really no problem? Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was sleeping peacefully on the sofa with her eyes tightly shut. Xian was a little worried. During this time, Zai didn't come out to say anything. Yishi only said that she was fine, and then went to study talismans like crazy. Little she said that Little Star is cultivating a kind of reincarnation heart mantra. Have you heard of any heart mantra related to reincarnation? Yuan she couldn't help but ask. Hearing this, Xian and Qin Yin both shook their heads. They had never heard of any heart mantra related to reincarnation that could make people fall into reincarnation. Even Yi, she didn't know what Yin Nuoxing was cultivating. She only knew that it was related to reincarnation. This kind of heart mantra, I'm afraid it's at the divine level. Reincarnation is the biggest secret. No one knows what reincarnation is, only that it exists. Qin Yin thought for a while, then said, in an ancient book of the Qin family, there was a person called the Reincarnation Emperor. He was very talented and saw through reincarnation. He even fought his way to the demon world and stepped into the divine realm. He was a very powerful person. He cultivated a very strange heart mantra related to the soul and spirit. He wanted to use the power of reincarnation to fight his way to the reincarnation realm. But because his obsession was too deep, he went crazy. He was a peerless figure from the last era. I remember him too. Yuanshi suddenly stood up, cleared his throat, and let out a dry cough. Then he waved his hand and shouted, I use my body to suppress the eternal reincarnation realm. From now on, I am a god in all the realms. Qinyan nodded and didn't refute. That was the highest praise for the reincarnation emperor in that era. He had stepped into all the realms and never tasted defeat. He used his body as a seal to suppress reincarnation realm. Even though he had already disappeared, hearing this description still made people's hearts surge. However, in that era, there were very few people who could reach the level of the reincarnation emperor. Moreover, it had been a long time since anyone had stepped into the reincarnation realm. Perhaps this was the heavens being unfair to him. The heavenly Tao reincarnation realm was at its peak and then at its decline. How could he go against God's will? Mr. Yun, just as the three of them were surging with emotions, Yi Ding's voice came from outside the door. Xian and the others calmed down a little. They took a sip of tea and sighed softly. Then, Xian put down the teacup and walked to open the door. When the door opened, Yi Ding thought he would see Yin Nuoxing. But when he saw Xian walk out, he couldn't help but be startled. His gaze became a little absent-minded. Then, he hurriedly lowered his gaze and let out a dry cough. His delicate face was a little red as he said, Jun Luo Yi and the Emperor of Tianxian want to see Mr. Yin. If there are any problems, I will reject them. When Xian heard this, he turned around to look at Yin Nuoxing. Then, he saw Yuan Shi and Qin Yin turn around and look at him in confusion. After thinking for a while, he said, tell them that Little Star is currently in a deep sleep. If there's anything important, they can tell us. It's the same. Yi Ding nodded. Then, he let out another dry cough. His gaze unnaturally stole a glance at Xian before he turned around and left. Zian felt that it was a little funny. He helplessly shook his head and simply stood at the door to wait. After a while, two people walked over. When Zian saw them, he nodded at Jun Luo Yi and Jun Luo Yi. Then he walked into the room. The two of them followed him in. Little Star is cultivating. Don't touch him for now. When Yuan she saw the two of them come in, he said indifferently. Then he added, if you're not afraid of going crazy. Jun Luo Yi and Jun Luo Yi nodded and sat on the chairs opposite the sofa. He originally thought that the two of them were going to talk about something very important. In the end, they came to ask about the divine city. Yuanqi thought about what Yun Nuoxing said that day. Then, he basically repeated what she said. When Jun Luo Yi and Jun Luo Yi heard this, they were very surprised. The commotion was not any smaller than Yi Ding and the others. Even Emperor Tian Xian had a look of shock and yearning. When Yuanqi saw that Jun Luo Yi wanted to say something, he waved his hand and said, "If you have something to say, there's no harm in saying it." Hearing this, Jun Luo Yi nodded. She took a deep breath and slightly clenched her jade-like hands. After a while, she said, "May I know what attracted young Master Yuan to the mystic dragon continent?" "Attracted? Nothing. We just came here to have some fun and to train our hearts in the mortal world. Understand?" When Yuanqi heard this, he laughed and touched his forehead. Then he said, "Small worlds, that is your mystic dragon continent. In the past, they could be seen everywhere in the God realm. However, with the changes of time and the passing of time, there may be many small worlds now. However, most of them are hidden and hard to find. We also came across this place by chance and came here to have some fun. However, it seems that you don't believe me?" When he finished speaking, he saw Jun Luo Yi looking at him with a faint smile. Yuanqi felt a headache coming on. Indeed, as Yun Nuoxing said, this girl seemed to be overly intelligent. However, there was no other way. Who asked them to be so strict in the beginning? Originally, they were about to go to the God realm, but they were forcefully pulled back and forced to participate in the mystic dragon ritual. "Young Master Yuan, don't worry. We're just worried about the mystic dragon continent. Our relatives are still here. Please understand." Jun Luo Yi said lightly. Yuanqi nodded and said casually, "It's nothing. We're just here to participate in the mystic dragon ritual. It's up to you to believe it or not." Hearing this, Jun Luo Yi could not help but frown. However, when she saw Yuanqi's calm eyes, she could only sigh softly. She still did not believe him. She did not believe that these experts would come here aimlessly to participate in the mystic dragon ritual. "Well, anyway, we are indeed here to participate in the mystic dragon ritual. However, we still want to see if the so-called sacrificial fire is the Een spiritual fire. I can't tell you that your sacrificial fire will be taken by us, right?" Yuanqi laughed bitterly in his heart. Skipping this topic, Yuanqi and Jun Luo Yi talked about this world's forbidden land. They even asked if it was true that there was a passage to the God realm. However, their answers surprised Yuanqi and the others. It was true that the forbidden land could lead to a second world. Moreover, there were people who came back alive to prove it. "I couldn't tell that you guys yearn for the God realm so much." Yuanqi chuckled. He did not mean to look down on them. He just felt that it was a little strange. The people of the God realm yearned for a small world, while the people of the small world were thinking about how to get to the God realm. People of the martial Tao only pursue higher realms throughout their lives, Jun Luo Yi said softly. Jun Luo Yi said softly. When she said this, her beautiful eyes even had an extremely bright light, as if she was telling him about her will, her determination. That world might not be suitable for you guys. Yuanqi glanced at her. He wanted to say this, but after hesitating for a while, he did not say it. He turned his head and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Then his gaze paused. He saw that the latter's body had unknowingly become very bright. "Not good. Retreat quickly." Yuanqi furrowed her brows. A bad premonition suddenly welled up in her heart. She hurriedly yelled and enveloped the five of them with the wind element. With a flick of her hand, she directly tore down the entire wall and rushed into the small courtyard. Jun Luo Yi and Jun Luo Yi were shocked. At this time, before they could react, they saw two figures pulling her and the profound sky emperor respectively and flying toward the sky. Meanwhile, Yuan-Shi directly lifted the entire secret room and was the last one to rush into the sky. Buzz! Yuan-Shi, who was slightly behind, suddenly felt a terrifying energy coming from his back. He did not even have time to look back. He used all his strength to urge the wind element and flew toward the sky. As for Xian and the others, Mei Mao looked down at the sky in horror. The entire dragon mist royal family became slightly distorted in their sight. The connected palace became extremely distorted under their gaze. It was like a whirlpool that sucked in the entire royal family. Moreover, this terrifying whirlpool was still gradually expanding, gradually encompassing half of Dragon Mist City. In less than a minute, it had expanded to a size of 10,000 feet. Looking down from the whirlpool, everything became distorted. Brother, suddenly, a terrifying energy spread out from the secret room. Yuan-Shi was so shocked that he hurriedly threw it into the sky. Then, the secret room suddenly exploded, turning into fragments in the air. Then, a petite figure suddenly rushed out and rushed to the top of the whirlpool in a few flashes. Xiaoxi, come back! Xian was shocked. She placed Jun Luo beside Emperor Tianxian. Then, with a twist of her slender waist, she rushed toward Yishi. Don't come over! Yishi turned back to look at Xian and shouted. With a wave of her small hand, a strong spatial energy directly grabbed the former's petite body and sent her back to Qin Yan's side. Xian was slightly shocked. In the blink of an eye, she returned to where she was just a moment ago. She frowned slightly and wanted to rush out again. Seeing this, Qin Yan quickly pulled her back and shook her head at her. Young Master Yin might have encountered a problem in his cultivation. The power of reincarnation is not something we can touch. We can't even struggle out of it ourselves, Qin Yin said calmly. Xian heard this, and her brows relaxed slightly. However, the uneasiness was completely written on her pretty face. Reincarnation. Jun Luo, and Emperor Tianxian frowned when they heard this. Did reincarnation really exist in this world? Jun Luo, helped Emperor Tianxian to Xian's side. She bowed slightly and said, "Thank you." Hearing this, Xian turned back and glanced at her. Seeing that she nodded at her, she smiled and nodded as well. Then she looked down anxiously. That terrifying whirlpool twisted everything into vortexes of various sizes. Xian felt a destructive force from it. If she entered it, she would definitely be consigned to eternal damnation. Dark erosion. She suddenly raised her small hand. Her delicate shout spread throughout the entire Dragon Mist City. Then, everyone saw a black magic formation suddenly appear in the sky, majestically covering thousands of miles. Following the appearance of the black magic formation, a black energy suddenly spread out between heaven and earth. It formed into balls and condensed in the air. This is the Abyss Shrine's great formation. Why would little she? Seeing this black magic formation, Yuan-Shi recognized it immediately. Almost everyone in the God Realm knew about the Abyss Shrine's reappearance a few years ago. He knew about the Abyss Shrine's great formation. Little girl, are you going to destroy me or some hypocritical inheritance? Just as the black magic formation was about to fall, a helpless voice suddenly came from below, startling Yishi, Xian, and the others. Just as this voice sounded, the reincarnation whirlpool that enveloped the entire city suddenly froze. Then it slowly shrunk. In a few breaths' time, it shrunk from the size of the entire Dragon Mist City to a size of 3,000 feet. In the end, it disappeared. After the whirlpool disappeared, the distorted scene below also returned to normal. It was as if nothing had happened. However, Yishi and Xian still heard some panicked voices coming from below. It seemed that things weren't as normal as they seemed. In the space beside Yishi, a black figure accompanied by a ray of light suddenly appeared, causing the former to be stunned. Then, she felt herself being picked up and her head being rubbed by that annoying hand. However, She didn't slap that hand away. Are you all right? Yin Nuoxing raised her head and looked at Xian and the others with a smile. Seeing this, Xian and the others all heaved a sigh of relief. Their figures quickly descended and came to Yin Nuoxing's side. When Xian looked into her eyes, she felt an inexplicable palpitation and absent-mindedness. In a daze, she seemed to see some illusory things. Little girl, Yin Nuoxing called out softly, causing Xian's delicate body to tremble. Her mind was quickly pulled back by her. When she saw the former with an apologetic smile, she couldn't help but blush. With just a glance, she fell into an illusion. Are you all right? Xian asked with concern. She had touched Yin Nuoxing when she was cultivating and was forced to experience a reincarnation life. It was so real that it scared her. She kept feeling that she couldn't come back. However, when she came back, she saw that Yin Nuoxing had fallen into it. She was a little worried about him. Yin Nuoxing shook her head. Only then did she see Jun Luoyi and Xian. She nodded slightly and said, "Let's go down and talk." Chapter 496. After Yin Nuoxing woke up, the profound Sky Sovereign and the profound Sky Sovereign were no longer at ease. Whether it was the faintly discernible strange aura that Yin Nuoxing emitted, or his eyes that contained the will of reincarnation, it was somewhat unnatural. As a result, they didn't stay for too long and hurriedly left after discussing some matters for the next day. Yin Nuoxing could only smile bitterly at this. He had just cultivated the 6 paths of reincarnation technique, but he couldn't completely control it. The faintly discernible power of reincarnation emitted from his eyes might last for a while. Seeing the door gently close and hearing the footsteps fade away, Yishi's calm expression suddenly changed. While Yin Nuoxing wasn't paying attention, she suddenly pounced into his arms and pushed him onto the sofa. Her little butt sat firmly on his stomach, and her little hand pressed against his forehead as she fiercely said, "Big brother Na, you have to tell me what you're cultivating." Yin Nuoxing had just taken a sip of water when he didn't expect to be treated so roughly. Before his saliva could flow down his throat, a huge force came from his stomach, and his breath was stuck in his throat. He almost choked to death, and even his eyes rolled back. When he came back to his senses, he couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw Yishi's face that was pretending to be fierce. That's right. Brother, you have to confess." Yuanshi squatted at the side and also stared at him with an unfriendly expression. On the other side, Xian and Qin Yin didn't say anything. They just looked at each other and smiled. The former took out a long sword, while the latter took out a golden energy gem. The vast energy made Yin Nuoxing almost cry. Hey, you guys aren't being nice. I just crawled back from the underworld. You can't force a confession out of me, or else I'll scream. I'll really scream." Yin Nuoxing had a long face. He looked at Yi Shi and the others lovingly and couldn't help but blink his eyes. "Even if you scream yourself hoarse, no one will come to save you." Yi Shi smiled wickedly. Her sparkling little teeth ground against each other, as if she wanted to move her mouth. "Break my throat! Break my throat!" "Everyone!" Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. However, she could still tell that Yi Shi and the others were worried about her, even though this kind of worry was a little strong. She sat up from the sofa and patted Yi Shi's head. Then she looked at Xian and the others, took a deep breath, and briefly recounted what had happened in the past 4 days. 6 paths of reincarnation technique. Xian and Yuan, she didn't think much of it, but Yi Shi couldn't stay calm when she heard the name. Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with her wide sleeves. But one could tell from her expression that she wasn't calm at all. 6 paths of reincarnation technique. Even among the rare cultivation methods of reincarnation, it's one of the best. The person who cultivates this cultivation method can gain enlightenment in reincarnation. This reincarnation can be a period of life or a simple period of time. But no matter if it's 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even 10 million years, it's just a short period of time for the person who reincarnates. Yishi said solemnly, "Well, that's pretty much what it means. Don't worry, I'm really fine." Yin Nuashing nodded and smiled. Everyone, as if we believe you. Who doesn't know that you're someone who risks your life every day and always say that you're fine? Yuan Shi rolled her eyes. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. He really didn't like to risk his life. It was just that the things he cultivated were very dangerous. Forget it. You won't say anything anyway. Yuan Shi sighed helplessly and patted Yin Nuashing's shoulder. He smiled and said, Anyway, if there's anything, remember to tell us. Yin Nuashing smiled and nodded. Then, he chatted with everyone for a while. Yuan Shi and Qin Yin also prepared to rest. They had been looking forward to the mystery dragon ritual for a long time, so they had to rest well. As for Yi Shi, she bounced in Yin Nuashing's arms for a while, pinched his handsome face, and borrowed the evil spirit eye from him before rushing into the secret chamber. Seeing that Yi Shi was even more anxious than him, Yin Nuashing was speechless. It was originally an idea that he had suggested, but in the end, Yi Shi was even more enthusiastic than him. After resting and drinking 2 cups of tea, Yin Nuashing slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he stood up, he was shocked to see that Xian had been quietly drinking tea at the side. Mei Mao had been looking at him, but didn't say a word. Her presence was even lower than Qin Yan's, which made him speechless. Thinking of the scene he saw in the dream of reincarnation, Yin Nuashing's handsome face blushed slightly. For some reason, he muttered, Lass. Xian put down her teacup and looked at him with a faint smile. She was elegant and refined. Her appearance was so beautiful that it could cause the downfall of nations. She also had an indescribable sense of mystery. This caused Yin Nuashing's expression to become slightly sluggish. He stared at her without blinking. Xian didn't avoid anything and just looked at him. Her beautiful eyes were still filled with a smile. She was even a little proud when she saw that he seemed to be a little dazed. Yin Nuashing stared at Xian without blinking. 2 images gradually overlapped in his mind. That palace, that fairy in white, and also looking at him with a smile just like her. This made Yin Nuashing a little absent-minded, and he subconsciously reached out his hand. A trace of astonishment flashed through Xian's beautiful eyes when she saw him suddenly extend his hand towards her as if he was inviting her. She stood up from the sofa and extended her jade-like hand towards that fair hand. After that, she slowly grasped it. Feeling a sudden softness in his hand, Yin Nuashing came back to his senses. He saw that Xian was standing in front of him, only 2 feet away. This scene was very familiar, just like the scene in his dream. His heart was as confused and puzzled as that scene. Her watery eyes took in all the changing expressions on his face. Xian was also a little confused. After the cultivation, Yin Nuashing had been a little strange. His eyes seemed to have experienced more vicissitudes of life, as if he could see through a person. Sometimes his eyes would become incomparably clear and very pure. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. The vicissitudes of life in his eyes disappeared without a trace. His mind seemed to have returned from a faraway place, and his eyes became very clear again. He exerted a little strength in his arm and pulled Xian over. Looking at the figure that was constantly enlarging in front of her, she was also a little nervous. However, she didn't resist and very naturally allowed herself to be pulled into his arms. She watched as he slowly hugged her tightly. Her lily-white hand was suspended in midair. After hesitating for a moment, she also put it on his shoulder. Her delicate body bent slightly, and her delicate ear was pressed against his chest. Little Star's heart is so messy. Hearing the strange sound coming from his chest, Xian finally couldn't help but speak softly. Yin Nuashing was slightly startled, and then nodded. I'm sorry, Xian was stunned. Her delicate body trembled slightly because of these 3 words. She turned her head in confusion and looked at Yin Nuashing's calm face. She felt a little upset. Why is it so sudden? No. Yin Nuashing shook his head and let out a long sigh. He softly said, In that 9-year dream, I dreamed of you. Something happened, but I don't want to talk about it yet. I didn't have the time to say these 3 words to her. Hearing this, Xian's beautiful face flushed red. It even spread from her cheeks to her sparkling earlobes. It was so red that water could be squeezed out. No girl could remain calm when they heard the person they liked say that he dreamed of them. "Little star, what did you do?" Yin Nuoxing's expression froze. His handsome face blushed, and he hurriedly coughed dryly. "I didn't do anything." After saying that, he rolled his eyes. He was feeling a little strange and couldn't distinguish between dreams and reality. In the end, this girl's words made it seem like he had lost his mind. "Puffed." Xian dragged out her voice. Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuoxing ambiguously. When she saw him roll his eyes, she couldn't help but laugh. Her jade-like hand quietly landed on his waist, and she gave it a hard pinch. He was so shocked by Xian's sneak attack that he flew up. He couldn't care less about the soft and warm body in his arms. He almost crashed into the wall. When he came back to his senses, he looked at her with embarrassment. However, all he saw was her graceful back. She walked into the room with her hands behind her back. She didn't even look back. Yin Nuoxing was inexplicably left in the hall. He sighed softly and scratched his head in distress. He seemed to have thought of something. He pulled his waist-long hair to the front and groped about a third of his hair for a while. He grabbed something with his hand and gently pulled it out of his hair. What appeared in front of him was a 6-color bracelet. The soul stabilizing bracelet. It's really used to tie hair. Yin Nuoxing was shocked. In the 6 paths of reincarnation technique, the 6-colored crystal took the soul stabilizing bracelet and fiddled with it for a while before disappearing. However, if he touched it directly or looked at it from the outside, he wouldn't be able to see the bracelet hanging there. He could only feel it when he touched it with his soul and spiritual power. The power of reincarnation in the 6 paths of reincarnation technique has strengthened my soul and spiritual power a lot. It should be easy to fuse those 3 now, right? After sighing for a while, Yin Nuoxing looked at the gradually darkening sky outside the window. He then looked at the tightly shut secret room and walked towards it. When he passed by Xian's room, he paused for about a minute before walking towards the secret room. When Yin Nuoxing walked into the secret room, the door of the room quietly opened a crack. A pair of bright eyes stared at him with a smile, until the door of the secret room closed. The door of the room also quietly closed. "Father, those people who wreaked havoc in Dragon Mist City a few days ago were all men of sacrifice. We couldn't find out where they came from." In the study, the middle-aged man in linen clothes was still sitting on the desk. He supported his head with one hand and looked at the book in his hand. However, he was a little absent-minded. Below the desk, Yi Daofeng was tidying up the books that were scattered all over the floor. He inadvertently mentioned this matter and then looked at the middle-aged man on the desk, as if waiting for his reply. Every year, there are some people who don't want to see the ritual of the mystery dragon as usual. It's not just the Dragon Mist Empire. I'm afraid it's the same for the other empires as well. As for their motives, I'm not sure. The middle-aged man sighed softly. He turned his head and looked at the night sky outside the window. He said lightly, "I hope everything goes well tomorrow." Jun Luo Yi, the profound Sky Emperor, and several dozen other people were in a hall somewhere in the Dragon Mist royal family's residence. Almost all of them were looking at the white-haired old man sitting by the window. It was as if they were waiting for instructions. Something big is going to happen tomorrow, and there's no way to stop it. After a long while, the old man sighed and shook his head. "Elder Yin, what about the plan?" Emperor Tian Xin frowned and couldn't help but ask. "It's feasible. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel." Elder Yin turned his head and looked at him, then nodded. Jun Luo Yi also frowned slightly. She then sighed and said, "Let's go together tomorrow. We have space talismans. If anything happens, we'll be able to escape." "Okay." Everyone nodded. The night quietly passed. When the first rays of the morning sun appeared on the horizon, the mysterious dragon continent, which had been silent for an entire night, suddenly had a wave of life energy that shot to the sky within a couple of breaths. A wild wind suddenly swept over the empty streets. It was filled with human figures that had appeared from an unknown place. Immediately, they pointed their spears at the center of the 8 great empires. They directly rose into the air and flew out of the city. Today was the grandest day on the mystic dragon continent, and these impatient people were going to participate in the ritual of the mystery dragon, which belonged to martial artists. That place was their stage. A ray of morning light spread through the window and squeezed into the secret room. Finally, it shone on the two bodies sleeping on the stone bed. Under the sunlight, the black-clothed youth's tightly shut eyes trembled slightly. After a while, he opened them in a daze. His faint purplish-gold eyes were filled with exhaustion. A faint light flashed through them. After a while, he finally woke up completely. His clear eyes looked at the gradually brightening sky outside the window, and he took a deep breath. He lowered his head and saw Yi Shi, who was sleeping soundly on his chest. A gentle smile appeared on his face as his palm gently stroked her head. Yi Shi, who was sleeping, frowned slightly. Her little head shook, causing Yun Nuoxing's gentle smile to become even gentler. However, when he saw Yi Shi rubbing her little mouth on his lapel, black lines drooped down. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After waking up for a while, Yun Nuoxing gently woke Yi Shi up. He patted his old waist, which had almost bent over from sitting, and casually washed up. He changed into a trench coat and even tidied his collar very seriously. Gently stroking the two rings with his fingers, Yun Nuoxing sighed softly. "Inin, let me some good luck." Then, he smiled slightly and pushed the door open. Xian and the other three who had been waiting in the hall for a long time almost spat out the tea in their mouths when they saw the handsome black-clothed youth walking out of the door. Although his attire was almost the same as what Yun Nuoxing usually wore, his trench coat, which was usually open, was buttoned up. A purplish-red pendant could be seen hanging in front of his chest. His long hair that was casually draped over his shoulders was also thrown to the back of his head. It had to be said that compared to his original free and easy appearance, this kind of grand appearance carried a heroic spirit. Moreover, his extremely solemn appearance actually carried a sense of seriousness. "Ahem, what are you laughing about? Be more serious." Seeing that the four people couldn't stop laughing, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. He wanted to pretend to be serious, but the four people's laughter completely disintegrated him. Xian laughed for a while, then walked forward and gently tidied up the creases on his clothes. Only then did she tease him. "You're dressed up so beautifully. Which young lady are you trying to hook up with?" "I'm trying to hook up with you." Yun Nuoxing grinned, causing Xian to roll her eyes. He picked up a cup of tea from the table and took a sip. Yun Nuoxing didn't see it, but Xian saw him pick up the cup of tea. Her pretty face turned slightly red for a moment, but he didn't look. After all, the teacup in that position was either Xian's or Yi Shi's. He put down the teacup, took a deep breath, then looked at Xian and the other three people in front of him. He smiled slightly and said, "Let's go." After saying that, he took the lead and walked out of the hall. Xian and the others looked at each other and smiled, then quickly followed him. The profound dragon ritual, the heaven-worshipping ceremony of the profound dragon continent that they had been waiting for nearly a month. Finally, today, the curtains that many martial artists admired and went crazy over had been pulled open. 1 month was neither long nor short, but it made Yun Nuoxing wait in the dreamland for as long as 10 years. That heaven-worshipping fire, in the end, would it really be as he wished? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.